Hi, I'm Dr. Denise Rollins. The fact that you are watching this video means that you have invested in Wholehearted Facilitation. It is a methodology that I created many years ago in order to have deeper connections in one-on-one and group conversations. This program may be a little bit different from other programs that you have participated in, and that's okay. In fact, the way you go through it may be different than someone else does. That's the power of the program. It can be customized to any individual in any situation. So today I want to give you an overview of what the program includes and how you can maximize what you get from the program. The course is divided into 3 sections. The first is overview information that will help you to strategize how to get the most out of this program. The second portion is tips in various situations so that you can learn to facilitate in a way that's most meaningful for you. And the third section is actually me facilitating various activities that you can use to wholeheartedly facilitate. With those activities, you can simply play those when you're facilitating, or you can use them to develop your personal style of facilitation. This program is comprehensive, but also it can be personalized to your individual needs. That's why you don't have to go in order if you don't want to. You may jump around to what you're most interested in. As you view each section of the course, what we will have you do afterward is to do some activity or think through something that will help you to develop your style. The secret to success for this program is practice, practice, practice. So as much as you can take the principles that you learn and then implement those in one-on-one and group situations, the better you will become, the more comfortable you will be, and the more you'll create a style that is uniquely you. In the beginning, you'll see my style, but at some point, it's going to be all about you and what you uniquely bring to your facilitation. If you need help on going deeper with this training, all you have to do is go to the Wholeheart website, and it'll give you ways that you can learn more, do more, and connect with more people who are also facilitating wholeheartedly. I wish you much success on this journey, and I look forward to seeing you at the end. Some people are curious about my background, and I think that's a fair question. It's not only that I'm passionate about facilitating, and I know that it's part of my purpose, but also my education and experience qualify me to do this work. My undergraduate degree is in accounting. I then moved on to get a master's degree in the psychological study of grief and death. It was a pivotal point in my life, and I so believe that it made me more sensitive to what people were going through and how to connect with them at some of the lowest points in their lives. I went on to get a PhD in marriage and family therapy, which gave me another layer of qualifications, understanding all of the pieces that come together to mold people and the tools that are available to assist them as they come out of whatever trials they're going through. I've spent a lifetime, in fact, my career, in various leadership roles, and most of them require that I facilitate for both small and large groups. It's so interesting because I am such an introvert and a quiet person, but there is something about me that comes to life when I get a chance to connect with people, whether it's one-on-one or in a large room of people. There is a special gift that allows those of us who facilitate to really activate change in other people. And it is something that we shouldn't take lightly. It's so important. And so the last piece is I've spent the last probably about 8 years as a coach, and in that capacity, learning to connect with people and to help them bring solutions out of themselves as opposed to me giving them answers. All of that combines together to allow me to facilitate in ways that are unique and wonderful and transformative. And I look forward to you looking at your unique skills and how that will make you be more effective as you help other people to come out of whatever situation they're in and take their lives to the next level. So, wholehearted facilitation, what is it? I believe that wholehearted facilitation is when you give your whole self, mind, body, and spirit, in order to bring out the best and the most vital parts of someone else. And when we connect in such a way, we not only improve the person's lives, but we also improve our life. When I think about why am I in this field, and I even think a lot of times about my purpose, it made me reflect the other day on a pivotal moment in my life. It was one of those moments I had gone off to a retreat for business. And on the way, I had purchased a book. I love books. I've always been a voracious reader and a lover of words. And I came across this book called The Power of Faithful Purpose. And it was during a period in my life when I was looking for meaning. I remember exactly where I was in that retreat center when I opened this book and I read the first pages. And the reason I remember is because I cried, because it spoke to my soul. And as I look back and reflect, the first time I read this was 13 years ago. And what I love is there's a activity in here that says, create a one-sentence statement that defines your main purpose in life. And 13 years ago, I wrote this: to know and love God, myself, and others, and use those things along with my gift for facilitating and passion for connecting with and uplifting people to glorify God and make a positive difference in the world. 3 years later, I revisited this book and did the activities all over again. And guess what I wrote? Ditto. I wanted the exact same thing. Isn't it funny that 13 years ago, part of my mission in life was to facilitate? And I sit here with you today talking about something that's called wholehearted facilitation. I believe that this passion and purpose that comes out of us in the process of helping other people to figure out who they are and where they're going, that's what wholehearted facilitation is all about. It's not the normal everyday thing. I don't facilitate up here and expect you as a participant to get it at your place. Instead, it is two people connecting eye to eye and heart to heart as equals, learning from each other in a process that is transformative. So I want you to know that as you embark on this thing called wholehearted facilitation, that it is different, that it is meaningful, that it is purposeful, and if you do it, it will change things not only for you, but for those who surround you. What I think is really interesting about the training is oftentimes in training, you come into a program and you're like, okay, give me the tools. I'm gonna take this stuff and help other people. And our process is so different. What we say is, in order for you to use the tools, there has to be a level of awareness and healing for you. And so we go through activities that you can do with someone else, but first you do it for yourself. And you do it with an awareness that each time you facilitate these activities and conversations for other people, that not only is it an opportunity for them to get something from it, but it's for you to evolve and grow. I love Wholehearted Facilitation because it fulfills the mission of the Whole Heart organization, which is to help people to learn, grow, and heal together. I think that if you participate in this program, you will be changed. In fact, I don't think it, I know it. And so what I want you to do is, as you participate and as you learn everything, once in a while, I want you to come back to this video. I want you to listen to what I've promised you. I want you to think about what I've laid out, and I want you to reflect on your individual experience. And then I want you to tell me, was I hyping this up, or was I accurate in the way that we can change the world if we facilitate in a wholehearted way? without reserve or hesitation, bringing the best out of others as we give them the best of us. This is a program for them, and it's also for you. And I look forward to being on this journey with you. Let's do this. I'm ready. Are you? So what I want to tell you about now is the structure of the Wholehearted Facilitation Program. It really has 3 components, and they are equally important in my eyes. The first part is the classroom experience, if you will. I call it an experience because it is unlike anything that you will have done before. We try to keep it as a small, intimate group because of the amount of sharing, the ahas that come from the experience. People come into this process and they're like, I want to help people. And what they don't realize though is first I've got to check my own heart and check my own mind. And so we complete some of the activities that we would do in sessions, but we do that with us being the focus of it. And it is always enlightening, both to the individuals and the people in the class with them. So we do that at several hours, and we do it in 2 ways. Sometimes we're in the same physical space, and other times we use video webcasting. What I have found is both are equally as powerful. The revelation that comes, not just for the participants, but also for us as facilitators, is amazing. What we don't know about ourselves, what we learn, and how we connect that with the ways that we will serve other people is incredible. In addition to that training, what we also make sure we do is one-on-one coaching with the facilitators, usually a master coach. The reason for the one-on-one coaching is so that we can see what one-on-one facilitation looks like, but also because in that classroom experience, sometimes some things come out that need to be processed at a deeper level, one-on-one with someone who is trained to do it. And so this is time that's all about you and only you. And that is such an important part of the process as well. The third part of this process is practice. People come in and they've realized that facilitation isn't just add water and I'm immediately a great facilitator. I can do what I do at the level that I do because I have put in the time and the energy. I don't want to take people's hearts into my hands without investing the amount of time that allows me to be sensitive to what they're going through. It allows me to pick up on the things that they say, but also the things that they don't say. It allows me to move forward a conversation in a way that's so skillful that people don't even notice what I'm doing. That practice is invaluable. What I have found in this Wholehearted Facilitation training program is that every group we train is unique. What comes out of that group, what happens in and amongst those people, the ways that we are pulled together, the camaraderie that is created, and the ahas and learning that comes out of it is so unique and special to the group that I can't even tell you for sure what activities we will do. I can just tell you that we will be led to complete training in a way that gives everybody what they need in the space and the time that they need it. It is you having a little faith in the process and watching us allow this to unfold in a way that teaches you what you need to know about yourself, but some things that you probably never even thought about when it comes to facilitation. This is an experience. And when you do this, I think you will be changed. And as a result, you will change those people that you facilitate for. Wholehearted Facilitation is about bringing the best out of people. It is allowing them to kind of pull out their issues, their troubles, and even their joys, to look at them objectively and then decide how they want to move forward. In doing that, though, we have to be able to acknowledge where people are and what they've gone through. And so in this program, we really say that there are several stages that a person's life goes through. When we're young and we're optimistic, we think about living just these wholehearted lives, living intentionally, fearlessly, and expectantly. We can take over the world and do the best with what we're given. But what I find is, even though we have that aspiration, at some point we all hit a wall. Those walls are caused by the situations that we find ourselves in, and often by the holes that appear in our heart as a result of any change or loss that we experience. Most people think of change and loss as death because someone physically dies, and I do think that creates holes in our hearts, but also other kinds of changes, both good and bad. When my kids leave home and go away and live their own lives, there's a part of me that has a hole in my heart because I miss the days when they were young and depended on me. When I changed from one job to another, there's a hole in my heart because I went from what I knew to the unknown of this new situation. And so what do we do with those holes in our hearts? I believe it's a time in our lives when we can benefit from what we call CPR. That's this process of comfort, peace, and restoration where someone helps to resuscitate our hearts through processes and strategies that make us stronger and bring us out of the worst of the pain that we might be experiencing. If you think about it in real life, if someone gets CPR and they're kind of brought back to life and resuscitated, the next thing that happens is they go into the ICU, the intensive care unit, and there all eyes are on them so that they can heal properly. They can figure out what got them to this point and turn that situation around. For us in our program, we say it's ICU, but it's also I see you. It's a time for someone to really take stock of what's in their life, who are they, what they've been impacted by, and what they need to do to get out of this situation. And then the next stage we call the ROC, which stands for recuperation and ongoing care. Because once I get out of that ICU unit, I have to find skills and strategies that are going to keep me from going back. I have to find a way to live effectively. That's a healthy lifestyle that will take me not just from where I came from, but to the next level. This process is the transition that we call Wholehearted Life, and it is part of the Wholehearted Facilitation program. We are acknowledging where people are, where they've been, and where they want to go to. And we are part of their journey to get there. We don't do this, though, by telling them what to do and how to do it. That doesn't make sense for us. Instead, what we do is we let people figure out their own lessons, their own ahas, and their own desires so that they can figure out the formula for their own success. It is such a privilege to walk beside people. The one that came in whose heart was just broken from the situations of life. And they realized that although they were bent, they can still keep going, that although they felt like they didn't have enough, that they were actually given more than enough. So the beauty is we will walk people through a process where they can see these different phases and stages of life. And when we teach them CPR, ICU, and recuperation and ongoing care, or ROC, what ends up happening is they become more self-aware, and that self-awareness leads to self-empowerment. But there's another piece to this process. We are going to give them the tools and the strategies so that in the future, when they hit a wall, when they have those holes in their hearts, when they need to be a little more knowledgeable about themselves and what got them there, and they need to develop these healthy lifestyles, that they are going to have something that will work them through a process to help themselves. It is called the self-coaching model. That self-coaching model is the game changer. And during this wholehearted facilitation process, you're going to learn to apply that model, the strategies and the techniques to your own life. and then leverage that so that you can teach others to use it. And when you do, I cannot wait to hear the impact that it has. We'll talk about that next. So one of the really unique aspects of the Wholehearted Facilitation program is that it acknowledges who we are on multiple levels. Yes, we are individuals, but we're also part of a collective as well as spiritual beings. And so acknowledging all of those levels and giving you tools at each facet of your life is a part of what Wholehearted Facilitation is all about. As an example, as an individual, when I look at my individual growth, I'm given a tool called the self-coaching model that allows me to take the conflicts in my life, stand back from them, understand what shapes me, and then where I want to go. So we not only help people with their individual growth, but we also help them with their collective growth. We do so by introducing a tool called the social communication model. I love it because it acknowledges how we connect with people by the way that we listen to them, the way that we speak to them, and the way that we respond to them. It does so in a way that builds relationships and strengthens understanding. And then the third level is our spiritual growth. And that is via a spiritual connection model that allows us to understand what is it that we believe, what is the promises and also the proof of what we believe, and then how we are going to apply that to our lives to live in a way that is eternal. I believe that's the piece where most of us want to find some purpose and live at a higher level. The way these three pieces, my individual self, my collective self, and my spiritual self, come together is that we look at those all in the context of the four important parts of our lives. Life, how we go about just living every day and determining who we are. Loss, what happens when we lose something or someone who is really special to us. Leadership, how do we impact other people? And then legacy, what will I do that will live far beyond me? So, as you embrace Wholehearted Facilitation and begin to understand the many dimensions of who people are, they're individual, they are collective, and they are spiritual. And then you mesh that with the major areas that we're impacted by, life, loss, leadership, and legacy. What you're going to find out is that this is not just about standing in front of a group of people and giving them wisdom and knowledge. It becomes a way of life. It also becomes a way that we see life and we see other people. It is with greater understanding and empathy and awareness. And when we put those Wholehearted Facilitation glasses on as we face our day, it changes fundamentally who we are and the ways that we impact just everyday people, whether it's in our families, at our jobs, in our faith communities. This is a transformative process, and I hope that you're ready to take that step. So we've talked about the self-coaching model before, and today we want to really delve into how to master that model. The way we do that is to really understand and study the model. What is it? Where did it come from? And then we apply it to ourselves and the world around us. The third thing we do is we continually practice helping others with the model by sharing its components and watching them work through their process. So where'd the model come from? Well, we call it self-coaching, but it's also CPR. And what is CPR? Think about it. It is when our heart has stopped beating or we stop breathing. So these critical functions have ceased and you need emergency tactics to bring you back to life. In a figurative way, that's what this process does for people. And so not only do we use the term CPR, but the letter CPR means something. The first C is context. Whenever we look at anything in life, we have to look at it in context. And in this situation, it's the context of how we look at conflict. The second thing is what shapes our perspective. And when we're looking at that conflict, what shapes our perspective is what's happened to us in the past and what's going on in our present. Both of those determine how we experience any activity, any occurrence. And then the last piece is our recovery process. How do we get through it, get over it? How do we experience it? Well, we experience it and get over it by first understanding how we react, what's habitual for us, what happens naturally. The second thing we do is we figure out what our result is. What do we want out of this process? What do we want out of this relationship? And then the third part is how will we respond? Our reaction is automatic and habitual. Our response is intentional, and it comes from a place of power and control. So when we understand those components of the model and the questions behind each part, we really get a better understanding and a preparation to go to the next stage, which is to work ourselves through the model. I've always been one of those learners that I learn best when I can apply it to myself. I get this aha experience. Okay, that's how it works. Oh, now I get it. And so that's what we want you to do. We want you to really apply it to yourselves. I think the world is in a moment of conflict right now as we struggle with the racial tensions and all of that really have gone on for many, many years. And what I see and believe about this moment is that it is a moment of conflict. And as we teach people this model and teach them to solve problems with it, what we're helping them to understand is that the ability to work through and grow through conflict is a superpower. I say that because we always want to avoid conflict, but it is in moments of conflict that we learn, grow, and heal. And so we want to give people great tools so that they can go through it. So I gave you the example of when we go through this racial tension, that it is a conflict. Well, what if we use the model to help two people who can't see eye to eye understand themselves and the situation better? For both of them, they're seeing the conflict, but each of them has a different story in their past. Each of them are experiencing it in this moment in different ways in the present. So what if we have both of them look at their past and their present and therefore see some holes as to why they see this situation differently? And then what we do is we work the two people through the fact that they're both reacting to the situation in certain ways that are patterns for them. So how are they reacting? And then slowing that down and saying, but what's the result that you want out of it? Do you want to build relationships? Do you want to destroy relationships? How do you want to feel? What do you want to do? Let's get that result. And then as a result of that, we then say, okay, now how are you going to respond? We know how you reacted, but let's respond. If we can help people to see each other's perspective in this moment and understand themselves through this process and the powerful questions that come with it, it allows them to come up with a solution that only they could have created. The last piece is to use it with people in your facilitation experiences. What often happens is in a situation that I have with folks, people will say, well, my mother always treated me this way and I didn't like it. Well, one of the parts of the model is to explore people's past. What made them the way that they are now? What did they go through? What are their beliefs? What's their personality? So oftentimes if someone points to someone else and the issues that they have, I will ask the question, well, I wonder what they've gone through. What has shaped them? I may ask about the present. I wonder, what are they going through right now that may have triggered the reaction that they gave you? Sometimes I don't do the entire model with people, but instead I pull pieces out so that people can come to some conclusions. If people come to me and they're having some type of turmoil with another person, oftentimes I will say, what is the result that you want out of this situation? When they tell me I want the other person to change their behavior, my next question is, but a true result is something that you can control. You can't control their behavior, so what is something that you want out of the situation that you can control? You see, by taking those pieces, it allows an aha experience, or it allows people to process and then use that in their daily lives. What I have found is it's not enough for me to share the entire model with people, but instead to keep bringing them back to pieces of that model, and as appropriate to talk about the entire thing. We've given you a highlight of the model, that it is about conflict in the perspective of my past and my present, and then we look at our reaction, our result, and our responses. But even though that seems like a great order, oftentimes when I'm working with people, I jump around in different orders based on their needs and my ability to react to them in the moment. So I encourage you to really study the model, get a sense of the questions, what it all means, and how it works together. Then apply it to your life, including things you're going through internally and your relationships with others. And then share it with the people that you facilitate for. When you do those three things together, what you will find is that you will begin to look at life through the lens of the self-coaching model. Doing so helps you to embody this model and give it to other people as a gift to empower them. In the process, what I found is that it also has empowered me, which is again one of the incredible outcomes of wholehearted facilitation. Good luck. Today what I want to talk to you about is how to facilitate when it's one-on-one. It's always interesting because when we think facilitation, we always think small group or large group. But really facilitation is many of the encounters that we have. So today as I talk to you, I want to talk to you a little bit about the mindset that you should have when you're facilitating one-on-one, also the structure of the conversation, and then finally some of the techniques that we have found to be very, very successful. Yes, facilitation happens in a variety of settings, and sometimes someone will approach me, and oftentimes after a group setting, and they will say, I'd like to go a little bit deeper or to talk to you more to uncover some of the struggles that I have. This is facilitation just the same. If you think about it, when you know that you're speaking for a group, then you prepare. You get a structure to the meeting. You pretty much have an agenda of what you'll cover, and you'll think about if there is any follow-up work that needs to happen. One thing that I love about the Wholehearted Facilitation Program is the fact that we have in our manual activities that can be done for a group just as well as an individual. So if you need content, it's always there for you. So with the mindset, I just want you to go into it knowing that this encounter is just as important, just as crucial, and just as worthy of preparation as it would be if you were meeting with a small group or a large group. The other thing about that mindset is you never know who you're speaking with, and that person may be the one who then opens you up to many other people that you can facilitate for. All of it is part of the mission of what we do as facilitators. So the second thing that we want to talk about is the structure of the meeting. As I mentioned, there is information in the Wholehearted Facilitation Manual about that, but you want to allow people when you meet, even though they say they want to go deeper, even though you've prepared and you have some information that you'd like to share, you want to give them an opportunity when you first sit down to talk a little bit about what's on their hearts and minds, to make sure that in that encounter they still want to go in the same direction. Perhaps they talked to you last week after a group session, but today, right before you meet, something really big has happened and they want to process that. If that happens, let them go in the direction that their hearts and minds are leading them. Why? Because whatever you have planned, they can never put themselves into that fully until they're able to get this other thing off their mind. Many times you can use the Wholehearted self-coaching model to work them through whatever conflict or problem that they're going through. As you get better and better at that model, it's not really structured. You don't go in a certain order, but you jump around based on the needs and the desires that are expressed by the individual. But for that structure, you want to think about asking them, what's on their heart and mind in that moment. If it's not anything heavy or deep, then you go into the activity that you want to complete with them, giving them an overview of what makes the activity important, walking them through each of the steps, making sure that they have the materials, and they complete that activity wholeheartedly. Oftentimes when I'm meeting with people one-on-one, I try to do things like remind them that they can be as vulnerable as they want to be. I try to listen on multiple levels, not just to what they're saying, but also listening to what they're not saying and watching what they're doing. And I try to be really engaged. There are moments when I have to show pieces of me in order to make it okay for them to show me broken pieces of them. I make the session not about me, but if it helps to add a little bit of information about me, I'll do that. So we open it up asking them questions. We then go through the structure of the activity. And then as we finalize the activity, we ask them what might they want to do differently or something they want to do new as a result of some of the ahas. This allows them to continue the process of going deeper even after the session is completed. In terms of techniques, I've mentioned one already, is that I try to listen on multiple levels. For me, my process involves prayer at the beginning. And my prayer is simply that I be diminished, that this session not be about me, but that I open myself up to totally hear from, see, and respond to the person in a wholehearted way that allows them to really hear themselves and process. That's a technique that I think is really important as well, that you create safe space that the person can really hear themselves. So even though they say, well, I mentioned last time how X impacted me, then I'll say to them, well, talk about it again. Tell me again about how that impacted me. One of the strategies for that is to let them hear what they were saying and they connect it. So I noticed that you said that last time, but you added this detail this time. What's the difference? Why did that come up this time? Asking curious questions is so very important. I always say that intellectual curiosity, asking them if they are complaining about someone, I often will ask, well, I wonder what that person's life was like growing up. What do you think shaped them so that they are reacting to you or responding to you in this moment the way that they are? So making sure that you're asking questions. And then the final thing is something that I really mentioned before about creating that safe space. Creating safe space is so important. It comes in the beginning when we remind them that this is a confidential session. It comes in the way that I facilitate one-on-one with them by really being there and present and engaged. If I'm often looking around and not paying attention, it diminishes safe space. And it comes in me remembering the little details of things that they have mentioned previously. When we do that, people feel like, wow, if they really listened and they really care, it is a safe space for me to share more and to go deeper. The final technique is remembering that we must encourage people to do their own learning and to find their own solutions. Oftentimes people say, well, what would you do? And I have to remind them and myself that I'm only seeing a snippet of their situation. They're revealing to me the parts that they really want me to know. And sometimes I don't see the full picture. So I cannot weigh in on something that I only see a glimpse of. Instead, it would be letting them know, well, we are two different people. We have been impacted by so many different things in our past and our present that my response would not apply to yours, nor would my response be adequate because I don't know the full picture. I want to help you to find your solution. And if you can't find it in this one-on-one encounter, let's meet again. I tend to meet with people no more than an hour, because over that it can be overwhelming for the person and for me. And so if we don't get everything done in that hour, then we schedule some more time to meet one-on-one. I think that it is very unlikely, if you effectively do a small group or large group session, that you won't have at least one person come to you and say that they want to meet one-on-one. So being prepared to have that kind of conversation and encounter is so very important. Before I end, I want to add one more thing. Those of us who do this facilitation work oftentimes have such a personality that people come to us and ask us questions. They ask us for our advice. And so we remember that even if it is not a session that has been scheduled beforehand, many times I'm at a family gathering or I'm somewhere in the public and someone sees me and they immediately go into what I call facilitation mode. They are saying things that are asking me to facilitate a conversation with them. And so I have to remember that no matter what environment I'm in, no matter whether this is scheduled or not, I always have to be prepared for facilitation. And so the strategies and structures that I created and that I shared today are things that I take with me almost everywhere I go. So remember, always be in that facilitation mode, always be in that curiosity mode, and always be in the mindset that it is not my job to solve someone else's situation. It is simply my opportunity and privilege to be present in the moment with someone, to ask them questions that allow them to solve their own solutions, and to bear witness to their process so that they feel like someone sees them, hears them, gets them, and gives them space to be who they were created to be. If we think about our encounters like that, then whether it is someone who saw us in a session or a family member, our child, our spouse, our parent, we will be of service to them no matter where we are and no matter what we do. I encourage you to keep facilitating. The more you do it, the more you think of what you do as facilitation, the better you become. Good luck. When it comes to how to facilitate for group sessions, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First, we want to begin in an interesting way. How do we do that? We tell a story, we ask a question, we share something funny or light. When you first get in front of a group of participants, they are checking you out and establishing in their mind whether this is going to be worth it and whether you're the person that they want to listen to for the next hour or so. And so grabbing their attention right away when all eyes are on you at the beginning is so important. So this is something that you really want to plan. Whatever the topic is, you want to make sure that you say something that immediately engages the audience. So that wouldn't be saying something like, oh, are we ready to start yet? Oh, what can we do next? It is that indecisiveness gives them a sense of who you are. You want to do something in a decisive way. Have you ever thought about who takes care of the person who takes care of everyone else? Could that person be you? Let's talk about some descriptions of that person. See, in me saying that, it grabbed your attention for a minute. It made you sit up and listen because maybe, just maybe, she's talking about me. It may be some different way to open up the session. My point is this, is that when you have all eyes on you, deliver. As you do that, it is important to let people know where you're going to take them. Nobody wants to go on a journey that doesn't have a roadmap. So you want people to know that today, for the first half hour, we're going to do an activity to get to know each other. After that, we're going to do something that takes us a little deeper, and then we'll end by 2 o'clock. People want to know what the format is, and so as we give that to them, it's one less thing for folks to worry about. Now, when you're planning for a session, I often find that people plan way too much information then can go in the amount of time that they've been given. I think it's our penchant for wanting to be over-prepared and not under-prepared. But what happens is when we make our minds up that we are going to put so much information into a session, we rush through it and we lose people. When we're facilitating in a wholehearted way, we really have to be open to the signals that people are giving us, the answers that they share, and if it's necessary, we can make a few detours. Perhaps we won't even get to half of what we have set out for the day because the conversation is so rich and there are so many learning points. So we have to be able to pick up on the audience in ways that are beyond what they just say, but it's the way they look, the way they pause when they share information. It is being able to listen with our whole hearts so that we can take people to a place that they haven't been to before. All right, when we're in the session and someone shares a thought or an idea, it is so important that we acknowledge that person. Why? Because a lot of times it takes people a lot of courage and energy to speak up and to share. And so if they share something and then we just move on to the next person without thanking them, perhaps without commenting or asking another question, it is as if we are ignoring them, and we absolutely don't want to do that. The other thing that we have to do is be also careful about those people who will tend to dominate a conversation or those who will be very quiet in the conversation. So if we are aware of that, then the person who dominates, we have to find places where we can interrupt gently and respectfully and move the conversation on. For the person who doesn't speak up, we can even say something in kindness that says, I haven't heard from Julie yet, and I can tell she has something on her mind, or I really want to hear her perspective as well. Do it in ways that we're not calling people out, but we're inviting them forward. In wholehearted facilitation, participant engagement is extremely important. And so with that, we want to make sure that we're asking questions, that there isn't any long periods of time where we're just talking and they're having to listen. We lose people and lose their engagement very quickly. So it must be seriously interactive. The last point is that when we facilitate in a wholehearted way for a group, one of the greatest ways to have people let their guard down is by also letting your guard down. No, we don't want to make the session all about us, but when we do activities, in addition to the participants completing them, we complete them as well. We do that wholeheartedly. We don't just throw off some answer, but we really think about it, think about how we're feeling in that moment and in that season, and then process it with everyone else. It shows them that they can constantly be learning and that they can follow your lead in being willing to share, process, and move forward. Finally, as you complete facilitation for a group, know that there are a million ways to get it right. So let your personality come out and allow yourself to facilitate in the way that's most effective for you. Don't try to be like me or the other person that you saw facilitate the session, but instead ask yourself, what are the unique and special things that I bring to this conversation, and how can I use things like my humor, if that's something big for me, my research, if I have a background that applies to this area, my natural curiosity when it comes to asking people questions. Use all that is within you in order to pull something out of the audience. And I guarantee you it will be something that your participants will remember and that you will also grow from as well. What I like about wholehearted facilitation is our work can be done one-on-one, facilitating a conversation and a learning experience with an individual person, as well as working with small groups. I usually say small groups are up to 8 to 10 people. That's usually manageable enough by one person. But I've been asked many times, but what happens when you have groups that are much bigger than that? Sometimes I have groups of 20, 30 people, and I've even facilitated for groups that include thousands of people. What do you do in those situations? Well, what I say to you is you can make that conversation just as intimate, powerful, and unique to the individual participants as you do when there are 1 or 6. The way that you would do that is if you have an extremely large group, what I would encourage you to do is have that person, have that voice who opens up the conversation by introducing, this is the overview of what we're going to do today. This is the theme for the day and what we're trying to accomplish. And then actually has everybody bring out their materials and walks them through the process of completing the steps for the exercise. This completing the steps for most of our exercises is an individual process where people are thinking about their own responses, what they've been through, and how they want to articulate their experiences. And so once they have a chance to process that, then you get an opportunity to break into smaller groups. There are 2 ways to break into smaller groups. Sometimes I have people break into smaller groups where I have a trained facilitator in that group. In those situations, it's usually a topic that is really sensitive and one that you may need someone with the level of expertise to be in the conversation. So you can speak to the whole group, give them the exercise and the activity along with the details, and then break into smaller groups of 8 to 10 people with a trained facilitator. In that situation, that trained facilitator would do the exact same thing that you would do with a group of 8 to 10. They lead the conversation, they participate in the conversation, and they make sure that every person has an opportunity to speak and be heard and process what they hear themselves saying so that they can make change when they leave the session. When we break into those small groups, we then get back together, and oftentimes the trained facilitator will be the person who will report back to the big group what the themes were of the conversations, what the learning points were, or maybe what the ahas were. We come back together so that every one of those small groups oftentimes will get a chance to report out, depending on the number of small groups that we have, or if not, if we have too many groups, just letting a few of them report out so that we can see that work has been done in that session. Now, when I have a room of hundreds or maybe thousands and I don't have enough facilitators, and it's not such a touchy topic that you need someone who's trained, what I make sure is that in every group you have the call to action. So that call to action is really what specifically should you be doing when you get in your small group. Oftentimes, there we want to make sure that each group has something in writing that says, first you will do this, second you will do this, third you will do this, and fourth you will do that. The more you have things in writing, the less you have to rely on people hearing things in different ways and interpreting them in different ways. A note on interpretation. Even if you have it in writing, people are still going to interpret things in different ways. And what I generally tell people is that as long as you learn something and get something out of it, if you do it differently than another group, it does not matter. What matters most is that you process, you learn, you grow, and you find some action steps to move beyond this experience. So you want to list out the specific steps that each group would follow, and oftentimes those specific steps include making sure that everybody in the group has a chance to speak and be heard without being interrupted. So it may be, depending on the time, if they have 20 minutes and it's only 5 people, you may say each person gets 2 to 3 minutes to speak, that we're going to have to watch the time so that everybody gets a chance to speak, and then we'll have general conversation afterwards, figuring out if there are any themes that emerge. So you want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak, to tell what's on their heart, and then if you have time, it's really important once they hear everyone else for each person to say, this is the action. This is the step that I will take as a result of considering what I wrote and hearing from everyone else. In those groups, it is really important to reiterate the importance of when someone is sharing The other participants are really bearing witness and not waiting to give that person advice. Because oftentimes we want to tell people what they should do, but again, we only have a glimpse of what they've gone through. We don't have the whole picture. Now, we may want to ask them questions if we have time, open-ended questions that allow them to continue to process. But again, giving specific advice is not something that I recommend. So in the smaller groups, we make sure that everyone is heard. We make sure that everyone has an action statement that they can come back with. And then when we get back in the big groups, we would ask that somebody from each of the smaller groups or a few people from the big groups, from the smaller groups, can report out to the big group. This gives momentum to the conversation. It allows people to see that everyone had a chance to really process. After we have the report outs, then I try to make sure as the key facilitator that I have a couple points that to end with. Maybe these are points that we want to make about what you can do with the information that you learned. We also want to tell people, be sure, don't just leave it at knowledge. Yes, you've gotten some knowledge today. Maybe you've felt a couple things, but if you don't then act on it, we leave the power of the activity right where it is, and we want to move beyond it. What we also want to tell people is, yes, you've learned and processed some things today, but there's greater power in continuing to process. Find a partner, maybe someone in your small group, maybe someone else who's been in this experience and was in another group, but find a partner to continue to process, to hold you accountable, and to report your successes to. So you can see how you can take a really large group, complete an activity, and it can go far beyond just a few people and one facilitator. Most of all, I want to always encourage people that when you leave people at the end of a session, if you can give them additional resources, things that will broaden their perspective, activities they can complete so they can gain additional knowledge, or anything that will help them to hold themselves and others accountable, give them those nuggets at the end. Oftentimes I will say, here's a free video that you can watch, or a book that you can buy, or something that makes the experience even deeper. What I want to emphasize as we end this video is to tell you this, that when you have an opportunity to facilitate with someone, that learning that happens is only a small part of it. Real learning happens over time as they process it that night, the next day, as they talk to other people about the experience, and as they continue to have things happen to them, that they go back and look at what they learned in your session. So encourage people to be lifetime learners, very curious about every experience, and willing to go deeper and deeper with whatever you've given them. I hope that this information helps you as you facilitate for any size group or any individual. And if you have questions, don't forget that you can send us a note and ask us to help you in any way that we can. Thanks for listening. So let's talk about using Zoom or other webcasting platforms in order to share your message. Many times when we think about facilitating, we think about being in the same physical space with someone else. However, the world has changed, and although in the beginning when there was a pandemic, when the pandemic started, it was out of necessity that platforms like Zoom were being used. Now, people are finding that it is a really powerful option. I've actually been in sessions via Zoom that have felt as if I was in the same physical space. I had the same type of emotional reaction and cognitive processing that I would if the person were sitting physically in front of me. So as facilitators, we really want to leverage this technology because it allows us to reach into spaces that we may not have been able to get into before. And it also allows people to be in the safety of their homes or businesses while still connecting and learning from you. So I want to talk about a couple things that will help us to be successful on these webcasting platforms. One is making sure that we present ourselves in a way that invites people to participate, and they can understand who we are and have confidence in what we're doing. The second thing we want to make sure is that we set ground rules that allow us to create safe space even across different distances. The third thing we want to make sure is that we use the tools that are available in the platform to deepen the learning experience. And then the fifth thing is that we use the technology that we have to get across a message that will change people's lives. So first and foremost, what I make sure that I do is that when people are communicating with me via a webcasting platform, that I make sure that the image that they see projects confidence, wisdom, knowledge, and that it's easy for them to see me and to interact with me. So I want to make sure that they can hear my voice. So I'm testing to make sure that I'm speaking loud enough or that I have a microphone that will assist me. I want to make sure that I am not going to lose the signal during the conversation. So oftentimes I am connecting my computer to directly to the router so that I will not lose anyone. And then finally, I'm looking at how I appear in that screen. When I look at how I appear in that screen, I'm making sure that my face is central, that it is not, they can only see half of me, that I'm not covered up, my face is not covered up by a hat or some other thing, that as much as I can, that I control the glare, that the lighting on me is appropriate and complementary to me. And so those things might seem small or even very surface, but you want to project the best image to the people that you are trying to connect with. That includes being in a space that there's not a lot of outside noise that will interrupt you. The second thing you want to do is think about any ground rules that you need to set in order to create a safe and productive space in which you can all do your work. One of the things that I think is really important, especially in the work that I do that requires vulnerability, is that I ask everybody to be on camera and to remain on camera. In the early days of me doing this work, I would notice you're having conversations with people and then all of a sudden people would pop off and on the screen. And if you think about it, if you were in the same physical space, it would be the equivalent of somebody leaving the room multiple times. And that breaks the concentration and it breaks the connection that you have in the room. So what I ask people to do is to stay on camera, but like anything that would happen in a physical space, if you really have to go to the bathroom or really have to answer an important call, that you excuse yourself and say that you'll be right back. So we're using the same social courtesies that we would use face to face, but we're just using them in this virtual space. Another ground rule that I often have is that people who participate, they make sure that they are in a confidential space. What that means is if we're all connecting with one another and we're sharing our hearts and minds, that we don't all of a sudden see your kids run into the room or your partner. We want to make sure that this conversation stays between the people who are officially participating. So that means you might need to be in a room that has a door so that no one can disturb you, or whatever it is. We want to have that same kind of safety that you would have if we were face to face. And then maybe the third example that I would give is that when you're not speaking on camera, that you mute your phones or you mute the video, because oftentimes those outside sounds and voices can disrupt whoever is speaking. You have to figure out what rules and guidelines you need to give to participants that will make this experience even stronger and deeper for the people who are participating, and those are the rules that you would share. The third thing that you want to do is to really leverage the technology. One example is in the Zoom technology, you have chat rooms. And so I can share a message with the entire group and let them know, welcome, here's a link that everybody needs to see. Or I may use a private chat. Oftentimes I use this with a co-facilitator. One of us may be speaking and the other one is watching the time. And so the person watching the time would privately say, you've got 2 more minutes to wrap things up. And so we're helping each other in that way. There are other things that you can use. You can use video and introduce that. You can show PowerPoint, even a whiteboard. And those tools can really enhance the experience that you have when you're webcasting. And then the last part of the webcasting experience is just this understanding and awareness that the ways that we connect physically when we're in the same room are just also available when we are doing it virtually. For instance, there are times that I am on the webcast that I can look directly into that screen and you may feel as if I'm talking directly to you, the same as if I were in the room with you. If we conduct ourselves in such a way that we use some of the same techniques, skills, and mindsets that we use when we're physically in the same room, we can get just as deep of a connection as we do when we're in that same room. Virtual and webcasting technology really can be a complement to the work that we do as facilitators and not a hindrance. It all depends on our mindsets as we enter this technology and also the ways in which we conduct ourselves. If we do some of the things that I've laid out here and add our own complements that we learn over time, we can have such a powerful experience using the technology that is available. The opportunities are unending, and I look forward to you finding ways and exploring ways to make your facilitation, take your facilitation to the next level as you help people who need what it is you have to offer. So one of the things that's really important when we talk about wholehearted facilitation is learning how to guide the conversation. In order to do that, what you want to do is really listen deeply, ask great questions, probe for understanding, and then promote accountability. So what does that look like? We've talked before about how important the skill of listening is in everything that we do. And so when we listen to people who speak during our sessions, we want to listen from all levels. We want to listen with our eyes, we want to listen with our ears, we want to listen with our heart. All of our senses should be involved in me understanding and being present for the person who is speaking up. Oftentimes as facilitators, people will be thinking about what they need to say next or what they need to do next. But what that does, it creates a barrier between you and the person. So we can't think ahead. We only can think in this moment and listen to what they're saying. Sometimes what we hear and what they're saying are two different things. And so that's the reason why we have to ask questions. I always say ask questions from a place of intellectual curiosity, where you really want to understand the person's heart, mind, and intent. So I'm going to ask the person, tell me more about what you're saying, or can you give me an example of what you mean by that? You really want to know if they tell you that someone in their life behaved in a certain way. Sometimes I'm intellectually curious and I say something like, what do you think made that person behave in that manner? Because you're trying to help that person process, but you're also asking questions that will take them much deeper. As we do this, I always believe it's crucial to check for understanding. And what that means is you say something like, what I hear you saying is this. Am I right about that? Because we sometimes listen based on the baggage that we carry or the assumptions that we make. So we have to be really clear about what the person is saying. And sometimes, would you believe that people actually struggle with what to say and how to say it? And so for that reason, we want to ask the person, are we understanding what they are trying to get across? And then the very last thing is that we promote accountability. And the way that we promote accountability is not by allowing people to ask us what should they do, or what would we do? Because we know we only have a sliver of the story. So instead of us being accountable for the solution, we turn that solution back to them. And the way we promote accountability is we ask people, based on what you've thought about, based on what you've heard, what do you want to commit to doing? Or what has changed for you? And what do you want people to hold you accountable for? At the end of the day, they have to be responsible rather than someone else. So if we want to guide the conversation, we have to be intimately involved, learning to listen, ask questions, probe and check for understanding, but then also to promote accountability so that they're in charge of the solution. If we do that, what we'll find is wholehearted facilitation is like this intimate dance, and that if you go with the flow, as if you're listening to music, it will all turn out right. One of the skills that I think is really important when it comes to wholehearted facilitation is being able to acknowledge both our commonalities and our differences. That is, the commonalities and differences between us as facilitators and the groups that we are helping, as well as the commonalities and differences between them as a group. So in order to do that, number one, we have to be aware of any stereotypes and assumptions that we might make. Once we do that, then we need to find out what things we have in common, as well as what areas we may be different, and then we intentionally find ways to leverage both. So let's talk about that. I have found in my lifetime that oftentimes within the first couple minutes of interacting with someone, I have made a lot of assumptions, some positive and some negative about the other person. And so when we do the wholehearted self-coaching model, what we say is, out of habit, we all react. That includes thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so what I realize is there are a lot of habitual thoughts that I have where I take an assessment of another person, whether it's fair or unfair. In that self-coaching model, what we encourage people to do is to pause and not do what's habitual or adjust what's habitual, and instead to respond out of a different kind of motive and a greater level of awareness. And so it's not that you're not to have those thoughts, it's that you are to arrest those thoughts and say, wait a minute, this is not based on reality. Let me get to know the person. So I say that because when you come into any kind of facilitation situation, I want you to have an open mind. And even if there is a tendency to not, you catch yourself and change it and say, this is a blank slate. Once you do that, it is a great idea to find the points of commonality. Maybe that person and I, we both love our children deeply. That's the reason oftentimes you do this icebreaker in an activity and you allow people to tell a little bit about themselves. What it allows you to do is to see their humanity, and there's a connection there that they can make with each other and with you as a facilitator. So find ways that you are similar, because that's often where a connection is. And then you will look and often see the ways that you are different. And what I say is sometimes people see differences as conflict. I see differences as ways you can complement each other, because if I'm good at one thing and you're good at another, we can bring those skills together and deal with it from a broader level. So finding the areas where you can complement each other is really important. So wait a minute, I grew up in a small town, but you grew up in a big city. We're different in that way, but yet we're also the same because we're both the third child in our family or whatever it is. So you find both. Then the last step is finding a way to leverage it. Sometimes when you're having a discussion and someone says, this is my opinion on it, and this is how I've dealt with it, you can often ask the person who is different, can you give us your perspective as someone who comes from a different area of the country? Do you see it the same way? Or you can even say, if somebody is the same, okay, you both were firstborns in your family, do you see it the same? You find those areas of commonality and difference, and you play off of it. And what you'll find is even across similarities, there are differences. And even across differences, there are similarities. And what that mindset does is it brings you together as a group. It builds community, and it allows you to learn, grow, and heal together. So that idea of leveraging and acknowledging both our commonalities and our differences is so important in wholehearted facilitation. We've got to be aware of the assumptions and stereotypes we're making, understand how we connect, understand how we complement each other, and then use it for the good of the group. Being able to facilitate at this level, taking in details such as that, only makes you more effective. And it also models for your participants a way of thinking, living, and seeing the world that will bring people together in a really powerful way. One thing that's important when we facilitate is knowing how to customize the content to the audience that we have. I oftentimes say that what we do when we facilitate wholeheartedly is we give people not a class, but an experience. A class is good, there's structure, you give everyone the same thing, and that consistency allows you to get the results that you desire. But in an experience, it's really about picking up on what's going on in the moment. And so in order to do that, you really have to be aware of who your audience is. Once you know what the audience is, you can use some of the guidelines that we have given you with every single activity. And then you're going to have to use a little bit of your own intuition, because if you are in the facilitator role, you have this ability already to just pick up on what's going on around you. And then the last thing you have to do is to be flexible and fluid. Let me tell you a little bit more about those 4 points. Number one, every audience is different. What's interesting is that I can have the same 4 people, but in 2 different sessions, and they are different in each session because who they are and who they bring to that experience is dependent on everything that has gone on before and at the moment that we get together. So the same activity with the same group can look totally different. I really want to be aware of who's in the audience and what they're facing so that I can customize it to the group. The good thing about the Wholehearted activities is we have it listed, each activity, we tell you how to do it, but then we have it divided by affinity groups. And those are, if you're facilitating for a group of women only, or if it's a group of Christians, or if it's youth or couples, here's ways that you can customize the material to the group. And so using those guidelines will assist you, whether you're working with that group or maybe a variation. So if you're working with a group that's a little bit different, you can use those guidelines added to your intuition. Oftentimes, people will come into a room and just the way that they speak to me, the way that they interact with each other gives me a sense of what direction I need to go. Maybe there's a way that I need to tweak the activity for that day. My gut tells me when we need to let an activity go much longer than I had planned, or cut it off and move in a direction that is different than I had intended. So use your intuition, because it often will lead you in the right direction, especially if you're picking up on the comments, the mood of the group, and where they want to go as an audience. And then the last piece is, with doing that and using your intuition, you have to be able to be really flexible and fluid. You can change at a moment's notice. You can do something totally different. You can take an activity that you've always done and add another element that is going to be based on what's going on with the person, what's going on in the world, or something that you sense inside of you. Being able to change things and adjust things in a minute is really important, because really what the audience wants is an experience where they learn something, they learn, grow, and heal. They don't care if you do it exactly as you scripted it out ahead of time. They care about what the overall impact is. So if you're able to do those things, if you're able to know your audience, to use the guidelines that we've given you, use your intuition and be flexible and fluid, what you will do is create a customized experience that not only will resonate with your audience, but also resonate with you. Don't forget, we're learners in this process too, so we want to learn, grow, and heal together. Good luck with that. So in the spirit of giving you as much support and as many tools as possible, one of the things that we've done is created some videos for the Wholehearted activities. These activities will allow you to help people to self-discover in a variety of areas. To give you an overview of what the videos are like, they begin with me giving a big picture view of the activity. Sometimes I tell a story, other times I make some key points. Then I walk people through the various steps of the activity, telling them what materials they need to have, as well as what they should do for each step of the exercise. You then have an opportunity to turn that video off, to give them more time to complete the exercise if you like, and then to allow them in a big group or in small groups to process the activity. Once they have a chance to process the activity, if you like, you can turn the video back on, and when you turn the video back on, I'll give some closing points for the exercise. The reason why we've created these videos is that oftentimes, especially in the beginning of the process of facilitating these activities, people want to see how someone else facilitates. So I show you how I might facilitate in a specific moment. But what I want you to keep in mind is that we're all different as facilitators. We all bring different gifts and experiences, and so the way you facilitate most likely will not be the same way that I do, because we're each unique. And the beauty of the Wholehearted facilitation process is that we bring our whole selves to the process, meaning we'll all do it differently. For every activity that I do, one day you may see me facilitate it one way and another day a totally different way, because it really depends on where I am in that space and time, and also where the participants are. So I tell you to take this information and take these tools and use it to help you get started. But remember, take each activity and make it your own. And if you do that, your participants will have a unique and transformative experience that only you can provide. Good luck in using the activities. Today's activity is called Meet My Mask, and it's an activity that answers two fundamental questions. The first is one that many of us struggle with, which is all about identity. The question, who are you? And a lot of times when we're looking at who we are, it's about what's on the surface. So the next question really becomes, who are you really? When you go beneath what you show and what you hide, who are you really? And so today's exercise will begin that dialogue. But let me go through a couple of things first. One is, have you ever thought about the way that children view the world? They have this sense of curiosity and wonder, and they are more truthful as they ask questions and figure things out. And yet later in life, we tend to have lost many of those things. Do you ever think about why we've lost it? I believe that it's because along the way, perhaps a child makes observations. Oh, mommy, why is that person that color? And what do we do as parents? Oftentimes we say, shh, don't say that. And in small and subtle ways, people learn that you don't always tell the truth. And maybe there's some things you don't even need to think or wonder about. And I think when we get older, the pain that we go through, perhaps the first betrayal by a loved one, has us make up in our mind that we'll never, be so vulnerable and truthful again. And before you know it, we are so jaded. Sometimes it's just to help people and not hurt their feelings. A spouse comes downstairs and says, "How do I look in these pants?" And maybe they're a little too tight, or they emphasize that the other partner has gained weight, and there's a decision to be made. Do I say this and affect her self-esteem or his view of himself? And so oftentimes we might say, you look good, honey, and we do it out of love, but that love is colored by us not really wanting to tell the truth. I believe these are rules and realities that come from society. That's what we have learned. Don't always say your truth if it's going to hurt somebody. Don't always say your truth is if it's going to result in you being hurt later. And so what happens is we wear these masks, and these masks protect us from the ways that people can hurt us, as well as sometimes the things that we hide protect other people from the ways that we can hurt them. The question is it appropriate to wear a mask? And is this something that is hindering us, or is it moving us forward? So today we're going to begin this activity by pulling out a sheet of regular paper. And with that regular paper, what I want you to do, 8.5 by 11, is to fold it in half so that it is 8.5 by 5.5. It'll look like a book, if you will. And once you fold that piece of paper in half, what I want you to do is on the outside cover, think of that as the front of your mask. And on the front of your mask, I want you to record those things that people can easily see and find out about you. If you look at me, you can tell that I'm a woman. You can tell that I am African American. It's easy to find out about me that I am a Christian. Just if you hear me talk for a while, you will learn that. So we want to put those things that both people see and pick up, and also those things that I'm intentional about projecting. When I talk about those things, I say those are your public persona, your Facebook self, if you will. I want to show you perhaps that I'm professional. I want to show you that I'm educated. I want to show you that I'm caring and loving. These are the things that I want to protect so that you know who I am. So on the front of that piece of paper, record those things that are on the front of your mask. I look at you and I see it. I listen to you and I hear it. I'm around you and I figure it out by what you project. So now I want you to open up that piece of paper, and on the inside, on the left side, this is going to be the back of your mask. And so as we consider the back of your mask, I want you to think about those things that people wouldn't know very easily about you. For me, I'm quiet and an introvert. People don't always know that because I'm always presenting in front of the public. With this activity, what we hide and what we don't show and what people don't see, we have an opportunity as we jot down words and phrases to be a little bit vulnerable. So if I'm vulnerable, I would say that sometimes I struggle with self-esteem, that I have this, I believe, unnatural fear of death that sometimes hinders me in relationships. So I want you to put what you hide, and as you do, I want you to consider being a little vulnerable, writing some things down that are difficult for you to write. Now keep in mind, when you share this activity with other people, you don't have to share anything that you don't want to share. But there's power in writing something down, because we put it out there for ourselves, and we allow ourselves to understand that this is something that I need to address. So we want to think about who's the me that nobody sees. One, because they don't get a chance to know me, or two, because I make sure that you don't see that about me. As you record those words and phrases, what I'd also like you to consider is that when you take a risk, that there is power in a risk, but also that you have the opportunity to include something that might be a little funny or comical. Why do we do this? Because some things that we hide are just absolutely silly. No one knows about me that I cannot line dance. I think I have rhythm, but I just can't line dance. And so to me, when I think about it, it really is funny. For years, it weighed me down, but there's no need for that. But that is something that I will put on the back of my mask. As you do that, and as you create the front and the back of your mask, I've given you some examples of what I might put. But know that when you create this activity, when you complete it, you're going to do it the way that's meaningful for you. So don't feel limited by the explanations that I give. Do whatever you want, because this activity is not about me, but it is about you. will have a chance to share, and you can share what you want in the creative way that you would like. So now you have an opportunity to meet in your small groups to share what's on your mask. You can go in any order, you can share it in any way that you feel is good for you. And again, don't forget that share only what you're comfortable in sharing. As you push yourself to do this activity, just know that the deeper you go, the deeper the experience will be for you. And that if you cannot share in a small group, after the exercise, you can always go one-on-one with somebody that you really trust, going a little bit deeper with the exercise. I hope that this activity has been insightful for you. And as we move forward and you go beyond today's exercise, there's a couple things that we want you to keep in mind. One is the exercise is not to teach you that you should not wear a mask. In fact, we believe that there are times when a mask is appropriate. What you have to do is use your intuition to decide when do you wear it and when do you not wear it? With whom do you share your real stuff? With whom do you pull that mask down? And with other people who don't need to know everything about you, how do you wear that mask in a way that is healthy and life affirming? As you go through the practice of beginning to take that mask and pull it down, it requires vulnerability. So continue to practice and move forward with showing yourself, but do it with trusted friends, family members, associates. Start with them, and then as you get experience, then expand it to other people. And then finally, tap into your own wisdom. That means go back to the activity, and when you pull that piece of paper out and make it flat, you'll have the opposite, the front of your mask and the back of your mask, a whole piece of paper, a whole side that hasn't been written on. Consider going to that side of the paper and writing your whys. Why do I show people this? Why do I hide this? And begin to understand yourself. And as you begin to understand yourself, you will understand when you should wear a mask. Have you been wearing a mask to your detriment? And when should you just throw that thing away and be confident and comfortable in who you are? Continue to process, grow, and develop through this activity. I've done it several times, and I can tell you that every time I do, it takes me to a place that is deeper than I went before. Thanks for completing the activity. Greetings. Today's activity is called Stabbed by Life. And it gets to the holes that have impacted us and become part of the stories of our lives. I love the graphic here because it really represents how many of us walk around in this world. Things have wounded us in ways that are deep and life-changing, and yet oftentimes we don't address it because we put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. Our goal in this activity is really to remove that Band-Aid and to begin to address it in a way that allows us to heal. I believe that the prescription for that is something we call CPR, comfort, peace, and restoration. That when you get that comfort, peace, and restoration that comes from the right place, as we look at our wounds and address those wounds, then we will heal in a way that will make us stronger as opposed to weaker. So as we move forward with this activity, what I'd like to have you consider is a couple things. We use the heart as an analogy in Wholehearted because the heart plays such a key role in our physical bodies. Life flows from that heart, and in our spiritual and emotional senses, that heart is so important because what comes from it can help us or hurt us. And a lot of times what is at the center of our pain is relationships. Relationships can be so beautiful and so full of joy, but I also have heard it say that the height of my joy is only matched by the depth of my pain. And so when we have deep pain, it also means we have the opportunity to have great joy, But in order to do so, we have to deal with relationships, those relationships that have sometimes left a stranglehold on us, so much so that it's hard for us to breathe. Moving those relationships aside and never addressing them is not the key. The key is to go back and to learn from it and move forward. In doing that, there's a key skill that we must learn, and that is about speaking your truth in love. And that truth starts with us being able to name what has hurt or harmed us and move forward from it. And so we're going to look at a chart that gives us a sense of all of the things that may have wounded us, or the way we use this example, those wounds have created holes in us. I believe holes are caused by any losses, changes, and conflicts that impact us in ways that are lasting. We make it easy to remember by doing the acronym STABBed, which stands for situations, things, associations, and beliefs. These are the things that can really hurt us. And while everybody thinks that loss is all about death, which death is a big part of loss, it is also about relationships and other things that may have changed. And so this graphic is really giving you a chance to see that these are some of the things that we might grieve. Again, when I use that word grief, you begin to think of death, but grief is not just death. It is anything that has changed, something that we loved has gone away, perhaps, and it hurts us. So I want you to look at the many things on this list, the many areas that can cause some sense of loss for you. The death of a family member, a friend, a coworker, or a pet, or even the death of someone that you did not know well. Perhaps it's a celebrity or a parental figure who you never had a relationship with. All of those losses can cause grief. In addition, there are changes in relationships, with a divorce, whether it be the divorce of your parents or you personally having a divorce, separation, any friction, those can be losses. But you'll notice on this relationship list that there are also some good things. Children leaving the house and growing up. Okay, we're all looking forward to our children being independent. But yet, that change, getting married, having birth, it changes what we know and it puts us into an unknown situation. It was great when my kids were all under my roof because I could have some control and I knew that they were all right. I grieved when they left the home, even though I celebrated also, but I also grieved because it meant our lives had changed. I didn't know as much and I was a little afraid. And so those are the relationships. I do want to also mention that under relationships, it's even something like political differences. There are so many people whose houses and workplaces are divided because we believe differently in terms of the candidates that we support. And that can create wounds and holes that are unimaginable. The last category says other changes and causes, and a couple of them are things like your health changing. I've had people tell me that when they were diagnosed with cancer, it changed everything. And with it changing everything, it was like their body had betrayed them. They grieved their sense of health that was before then. Something good, I changed my housing. Perhaps I moved to a nicer house or a different neighborhood, but I'm leaving many relationships and friends behind. And so it's a good thing, but I leave it. And it can be something that's even intangible, like when your expectations change, when your expectations are different than reality. I thought I would be here at a certain point, but now I've not achieved that. So here's the thing. What we know is all of these things can cause some type of grief, but that we have almost made grief a bad word. And so we want you to know that grief is not a disorder. It's another thing that allows us to process something that has hurt us. And so grief is very healthy when you have the right tools. And one of the greatest tools is first being able to name truthfully those things that have created wounds within you. And so to do that, for today's activity, what we're going to ask you to do is on that list to place a check mark by each type of loss you've experienced. You may even find yourself putting a check mark, putting in there the name of the person that you might have lost or the date that your housing changed. You can do it creatively, whatever you want, but I want you to go through there and have an assessment of the losses that you've experienced. If you have extra time, you might even say the year that it happened, because it gives you a sense of what's been going on in your life at certain times. And then after you've gone through the list and checked off everything that's impacted you, under each category, death, relationships, and other causes, I want you to circle one area, one loss that perhaps you still need to heal from. Now, a lot of times people will say, oh, I'm over that. But when you constantly are going back and reflecting on a loss, when you're constantly, something comes up and it can easily make you emotional and sad and cry, it indicates that there's something there that has not been healed. If it makes you mad, if a lot of things that you do in your life is because of this and those things are negative, it might mean that there's something that has not healed. So I would ask you to circle one of each of those losses, so as something that maybe you need to work on. And so now we're going to look at those three losses from the lens of telling our story. And so with that, I want you to get a piece of paper and begin to articulate that loss. You can actually do it on the back of your handout. And whatever the loss is, begin to jot down what actually happened to you, what occurred, because we have to be able to tell our story. And our story is important, it matters. And once you've told the story, you want to articulate the wound. What hurt did it cause? Because I lost this person, what it did is it took away my sense of stability. It took away my sense of trusting the world. It gave me a great fear. So I want you to articulate what hurt it caused, but then identify the legacy of that wound. Now, a legacy can be both positive or negative. So maybe the legacy is that because of that loss, you went on to do greater things, because of the end of a relationship or something like that. You loved deeper. So it might be something you did that was even greater, but it also may be something where a negative remnant still remains, that because of that you turned inward, or you just didn't make yourself as vulnerable to other people. Think about how that situation or loss hurt you, and then what happened in your life as a result of it. And then it's not enough to have knowledge of something. We have to then take that knowledge and put it into practice. And that means when you realize what the legacy of that loss is, what then becomes the action that you're going to take because of it. If the loss did something good for you, how do you take it to the next level? Or how do you teach others when it comes to that action? But if it did something harmful for you, what might you do to change the way you look at the situation or the way that you react in the future? So we really want you to take some time to work through those three wounds. And then when you get together in your small groups, each of you select one of the wounds and share it with one another. Just remember that as we select those wounds and share those wounds, as listeners, our job is simply to listen and bear witness. We don't need to give each other advice. We need to sit and just be present in the moment, because the realization and what needs to happen next needs to come from the person. And so that person needs to take ownership and the leadership in figuring out what they want to do next. Good luck. All right. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that activity, in the sense that it could be hard to bring up some stuff that has been causing you pain, but yet you got something out of it. You maybe had some ahas, and you have come away with at least one thing that you might do differently to take yourself to the next level. What I want you to remember and think about with this activity is that all change can create loss. and loss can create grief. And when we know that, we better understand really what's in our hearts and what's going on. And we don't treat it as a bad thing, but we treat it as something natural. What we also do is understand that even though we wish we had no wounds, um, that wounds are a part of life and they shape us, but they also make us stronger. We can move from holy people with holes all over us to being whole when we take those wounds, we find something to fortify and fill up those wounds, and in the end, we're stronger than we were before the wound occurred. So it doesn't have to be a negative thing that we have wounds. What has to be necessary in this process, though, is that we have to choose. The only way that we make a difference, the only way that we live differently, is if we choose to live healthier in the shadow of loss. And that choice gives us tremendous power. So I wish you much success as you use your power to address your wounds and move forward in a healthy and effective way. Hello. This activity is called Extending Kindness and Grace, EKG, the thing that moves our heart forward. And so as we begin this activity, I want you to keep in mind a couple things. One is there are some statements that people use all the time that I don't think we always think about. Take care of yourself, show kindness. And the question that I always have is, but what does that really mean? And sometimes it's hard to practice kindness, and sometimes it's hard to take care of ourselves. So how can we be more effective and more intentional in those areas? I've found that oftentimes I avoid some of those things. And so how do I move past avoiding them so that I can develop meaningful relationships and oftentimes effective communication with others and myself? So this activity is designed to help us to get to that place. In order to do that, we ask that you take out a piece of paper and fold it in half, 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that will now be 8.5 by 5.5. What I'd like you to do is on the outside cover to put your initials. And when we open it up on the inside left cover, I want you to put the initials of someone that you struggle with having a good relationship with. This is maybe someone that there's always conflict with, or someone that is just absent from your life and that you don't think fondly of. It is just someone that maybe the relationship needs to be worked on, but you just don't have the energy or the strength. And as you complete this activity, what we'd like you to do is first go to the front of the handout where you put your initials and write what you like about yourself. Oftentimes I'll tell people to give me some good things about themselves and they'll immediately say the things that they need to improve. Sometimes it's really hard for us to love on ourselves. So we're going to begin by extending kindness and grace by writing the things about ourselves that we love and embrace and or need to embrace. So don't be stingy here. Write things that are really good about you. And once you've done that, and just look at it and smile because you're good and you've got goodness in you. That when you open up the paper and you see the person whose initials that you wrote, the person that you struggle with, the person that the relationship may not be the greatest, I know that you can give me a list of all the things that that person might have done wrong, the ways that the person hurt you, and I want you to set those aside for a moment. And I want you instead to focus on the things that are good about that person. Sometimes it's going to be a stretch for you to find those good things, but I really want you to be intentional about finding some good things about that person. And when you get in your small groups, what I want you to really do is to talk about the things that are good about you. People will say, oh, that's not humble, that's bragging. No, it's nothing wrong with showing love to yourself. That is self-care. And so writing down the things that are good about you and claiming those things, it's almost as if you're giving yourself a big old hug. And then I want you to share in your groups the things that are good about the person that you struggle with. Um, Try to name at least 3 things and share that about it. And what I want you to do, perhaps in your discussion, if you have time, or definitely afterwards, is think about, if you're a good person and have good qualities, and the other person has good qualities, is there a way to continually extend kindness and grace? It doesn't mean to uh, overlook bad behavior or anything like that, but extend kindness and grace to that person and yourself as a way of opening the door to building a better relationship. Oftentimes, people are not all good or all bad. That includes us. And when we find the goodness, it gives us something to connect to. So share in your small groups to the degree that you want to, and the ways that feel comfortable. You know, who you need, this ways that you have extended kindness and grace to yourself and this person, what it feels like to do that, and also what you might use as leverage to build some type of relationship or open a door. This activity is called I See You and I See Me. It is a critical look at our families, the ways they have influenced us, and also the ways that we have influenced them. As we begin this activity, I want you to think about a couple things. Number one, what we want to do is celebrate you as an individual. But we also know that individuals are also part of a collective, whether it is a family of choice, um, a gathering of friends, some other group that you're part of, or the family of birth, the group that you were born into. Those connections have impacted you in some way. And it is a really beautiful process when you can look at those connections, understand how you've been influenced by them, or also understand maybe some gaping holes or wounds that you have suffered as a result of the peace that doesn't exist with those who've influenced us the most. It's almost like this process is gazing into a mirror and seeing you in the reflection of your family, and seeing your family in the reflection of you. This will be a deep look, and I think it'll be also an insightful look. So as we do that, let's get started by pulling out a blank piece of paper. And what I'd like you to do is to create, if you will, a table. And it's going to have 5 columns going across. And if you like, 5 rows going down. So you'll end up having 25 spots in your table. This one on the screen only has 15, but you can do 25. And so what we want you to do is, in the very center of that chart that you've created, we want you to put your name, because at the heart of your family is you. You play a central role. We've often said that when the central person in the family heals, the whole family heals. And the only person you have control over is you. And therefore, you play a central role in any relationship that you have. And so what we're going to do from here is really chart out those relationships and those people who exist in our family. As we do that, up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a circle and a square. To make it a little easier, what you do is you'll write a circle, you'll make a circle, and that'll include a female person on your family tree. And if you make a square, that indicates a man. Visually, when you look at it, you'll just easily be able to see the men and the women in your chart. And so what we want you to do is, you're at the center of the chart. And the first thing that we want you to do is, on the row above yourself, you're going to write a circle or a square to denote your father, and a circle to denote your mother. And when I say father and mother, what I really want you to do is to indicate those people by birth, but you may have more than the people who gave birth to you. Many of us have parental figures in the sense that we were raised by someone who may not be technically our father or mother, but we thought of them as such. An example is I often have groups of cousins that perhaps were raised by their grandparents. So their grandparents weren't just their grandparents, but they played a parental role. In my own life, I've had aunts who were in a role that was like a parental figure. And so on this line, I might put an aunt or uncle or godmother or godfather who really played an integral role in my life, or somebody who was missing from my life that I wish had played. So here on this line above your name, you're going to write your parents' names, one in each block. And then you'll also write any other parental figures. And if you like, put a square to indicate a male and a circle to indicate a female. But this is totally up to you, so you don't have to if you don't want to. On the line that you have parents, the line above it is where you would write any grandparents or any grandparent-like figures. And so here, even if you never knew your grandfather or grandmother, being able to indicate these are the grandparents who were in my life. And it might be grandparents by birth or grandparents by election, because that person just stepped up and played that role in your life. If you need more blocks, just be creative, write as much as you need to, but let's put those names in the blocks. Now, if we go back and look at where you are as the central figure, then to the right of your name, what we want you to begin writing is the names of any siblings. These are the folks that you grew up with. And again, siblings can be siblings by birth or siblings by, this is the way that we were raised. Oftentimes in our community, we have play brothers and sisters, but the bonds are just as strong as a blood brother or sister. And so those people you can put on your chart as well. Then to the left of your name, what you're going to create and put are any other significant others. Now, why do I say others? It might be right now someone who is serious in your life that you're dating. It may be a husband or wife, or it may also be an ex-husband or wife. If this person played a significant role in your life, we want to record those relationships, because those relationships, when you are as close as someone who's in a romantic relationship, those people have an influence on us that is often lasting. And then in the row beneath your name is where you will write your children. And so you'll indicate your children, again, by birth, by election, stepchildren, whoever those individuals are, you will write those in the row beneath your name. And then finally, the row beneath children is where you would include your grandchildren. So this exercise, it's fairly simple, but when you have to explain it to someone with a chart that's pretty stagnant like this one, it's a little bit difficult. So if I go through it again, you're at the center with your name. Above you is any parents or parental figures. Above your parents, would it be any grandparents or grandparent-like figures? When you go back to where your name is, to the right of your name are going to be any siblings or people who were raised like your siblings. To the left of your name are going to be any significant romantic relationships. If the relationship resulted in a child, but it wasn't marriage, that's a significant relationship. And so we want you to include that to the left of your name. Beneath your name will be your children or people that you took on parental roles with. It may be a godchild. And then under that will be your grandchildren. If you run out of space, just get a new piece of paper and start again. But the key is to represent here the relationships that you have in your life, the people who exist. Now, for the purposes of this activity today, we're not going to go through and explain every relationship. But after today, it would be a really good idea if you go through and do, with every name that's on that chart, some things to identify who that person was and the role that they played in your life, whether the relationship was strong or weak, and things that come to your mind about that relationship. Remember, this is all about dissecting relationships that exist in your life in your family and how they have impacted you. So feel free to come back to this activity to really develop it later. But for this activity, we're going to really choose only 3 relationships that we are going to focus on. And looking at that chart, I really want you to identify the people who, perhaps 2 people who've had a significant influence on you, that they, whether good or bad, they have impacted you in such a strong way. And then the third person that you would indicate is just someone that maybe the relationship was never as strong as you wanted it to be. And we're going to dissect that as well. So 2 people that really, when you talk about your life, you say these people, maybe one in a good way, one in a bad way, these people really impacted me. But then I'm going to pick someone, maybe it's an estranged sibling that I never really had a relationship with. And that's going to be the third person that I'm going to focus on for the purpose of this activity. So what you'll do then is pretty much create a chart that's going to indicate, okay, the 3 people that you're going to work on, what is that person's name? Let's say if I decide to do my mother, then I would put my mother's name. Her title in my life, of course, is mother. And then I'm going to indicate the role that she played in my life. And so she was a guide for me. She was one who was my best friend at times. She was my confidant. Anything that I couldn't tell other people, I could tell her. So the things that I thought about her, the ways that I felt about her, the things that we did together, I really want to think those through, because roles can be very complex. The role that somebody played can be very different from the title, or it might be the same. But you want to really think about, what did that person do in my life? And with that being said, where is that person's and your relationship today? You could say it's really still a strong relationship, or maybe now we're distant for some reason, or perhaps, as in my case, that person is deceased. So I'm going to write down that the person is deceased. And then the last part is, what are your feelings about that? And that really is a chance for you to go really deep, because the fact that my mother was my confidant it's like a gaping hole became missing in my life when she left, because it wasn't as easy for me to share as much with anybody else. So my feeling is, it still pains me to think about the whole, yet it also encourages me, because in recent years, my stepmother has kind of stepped into that role that my mother had. So she doesn't try to replace my mother, but many of the things that I did with my mom now happen with my stepmom. So this activity requires that you kind of go through and focus on all of these aspects of that relationship. And then the last thing to do is to come together in your small groups and really talk about what it is that you shared on that piece of paper. And so as you do so, I want you to talk about a couple things, the roles and the relationships that stick out, maybe things that, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how much I need this, or how much I needed that person, or how much I'm disappointed that this doesn't happen in that relationship. So we want you to think about that. We also want you to think about, what and who are you missing? I remember doing this activity before, and speaking of someone who is now deceased, and realizing that that person played this protector role in my life. And it was this realization that I truly missed having someone to protect me. Over the weeks and days after, when I got a chance to really process that realization, what I found was that at the time in my life, I needed that person to protect me, but yet I had now developed the skills to protect myself. So even though I was missing that role, I had supplemented it by growing and developing myself, which was a beautiful thing to realize. When you think of those roles, I want you to think about, what would you like to change? Is there anything that you want to do differently? maybe the way you perceive the person or the relationship with that person. And then the last thing I want you to think about is, what are the actions that you plan to take as a result of it? You know, what are your ahas from this experience? When you share as a small group, you're only going to choose, you can choose one person to go in depth with, but then I want you to have the general conversation around these questions that are indicated, because this is about you realizing some things and deciding, what is it that I may need to do differently? We talked about your thoughts and your feelings, but now when it comes to action, what will I do differently? As always, remember, the way you process this activity is individual and specific to you. So whatever way you need to process it, you do that. And I think that when you hear other people's stories and you consider your own, some lights are going to go off in terms of what you want to do and how you want to do it. So have your conversations, and don't forget that it's all about you, not about fitting into some cookie cutter image of how this activity is to go. Good luck. All right, now that you've completed that, there's a couple of things that I'd like to point out for you. And that is that this is a great chance to just examine and to look and to reflect. And when we do that, oftentimes we find new meaning, and we find even deeper relationships with the people that are in our lives. You just have to decide, where do I start and when? And so pick one relationship or one role and take small steps to move to the place that you want to be. I go back to the fact that you are at the center of your family. And so because you're the only person that you can control, when you heal, when you make positive steps, when you make positive choices, it impacts people in your circle, in your family chart. And so it's not your responsibility to take care of everyone, but it's a beautiful thing when you know that when you grow, develop, and change, it could impact those who choose to do the same. And with this, I want you to take this perspective, and really this mandate is that you don't have to take on pressure. You can just simply look for opportunities to motivate yourself and others to learn, grow, and heal together. This isn't about doing something that's overwhelming to you, but instead to take a small step that can create big changes. Understand who you are in the perspective, in the whole scheme of things when it comes to your family, and understand who they are when it comes to who you are. Doing that will allow you to better appreciate and acknowledge what exists, and then determine and decide where you're going to take it as a result. Good luck in continuing to process this activity. As always, do it wholeheartedly. And if you do so, I think you will continue to learn in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Thank you. Hello, today's activity is called Plenty of Planks, and it's a great opportunity for us to look for the things that divide us, but also can bring us together. And so as we get started today, there's a couple points that I'd like to make as we move forward. And one is, everything that we do is about relationships. We were created to be in relationships with one another. And at the surface of it, that is very beautiful. It's very powerful. And yet underneath, when we look at the things that are behind relationships, it also can be fraught with problems and struggles. And so this activity allows us to look at relationships in the context of where they are right now, and also where we can take them. And so a couple points. One is that relationships can absolutely weigh us down. If you think about it, there are people with which each of us most likely have an issue that is unresolved. And the way you know that it's unresolved is that from time to time, that thought will come over your mind, maybe filled with anger. Everything is going well with the person, but then something comes up and it brings up all those old hurts and pains. And so we all have relationships that weigh us down. But not only can relationships weigh us down, but we can use the relationships as a weapon. And that is, we use the things that have happened between us and the person to beat the person down, to hold them. They can't get too high, because we're going to say, remember when you did this to that person or to me, and actually use what has happened to hurt or hinder the person. Those are two ways that relationships can be used or experienced in negative ways. But I don't want you to have the opinion that all relationships are negative, because that's absolutely not the case. Some relationships are life affirming. At the Whole Heart Center, we say that life is living. It's an action word. It is intentional, meaning I do it on purpose. F is for fearless, meaning I may be afraid, but I move forward anyway. And we move forward with expectancy. That's the E, expecting good things. Can you imagine if a relationship gave us life, that it was intentional, that we could be fearless in the relationship and that we could expect good things? Well, that is possible, and that's what we call life affirming. And so even though you may have the first two situations happen, the relationship has weighed us down or it's been used as a weapon, we can use what has happened to make something good. And so that's what this activity is about. Let's move forward with it. So for this activity, what I want you to do is think about the relationships, both good and problematic, in your life. In this exercise, we're going to name those relationships and we're going to claim them in a way that will build us and the other person up. So what I want you to do is, on the illustration, you see these sticks, which are what we can use as planks. If you have sticks, you can use that. Otherwise, you can use a piece of paper and divide it into 3 parts. So as you do that, I want you to think about one relationship where past events or something that happens has created a weight or a heaviness between you and the other person. Perhaps it was some disappointment that you experienced from them, or it could be a disappointment that they experienced from you, and it turned the relationship into something negative. Meaning when you see that person, there's not immediate joy. There's always this weight associated with it. You may say kind words to each other, but behind those words are something more. And so we want to think about one relationship like that. And if you can, put the person's initials on one part of the paper or on one of the planks. The second relationship I want you to think about is a relationship where maybe you feel like every time something goes wrong, that person beats you down with something that you did wrong. They verbally will tell you about how wrong you were, how much you hurt them. In fact, this probably happens often. Sometimes in those kinds of relationships, you are feeling anxious when you're around the person, because it's almost as if you're waiting for them to say or do something that reminds you of your past. They won't let you live it down. So think about that person and put their initials on the sheet as well, or on your plank, if you will. And then the last situation that we're going to have you look at is one where you've moved past what has occurred. And in doing so, the relationship is really strengthened. This could be someone, maybe you didn't talk to them for a while. Maybe you had some kind of falling out. But yet there came a time when the two of you sat down together. You had a conversation about what happened, not forgetting it, but forgiving it, and moving forward in a way that you don't bring it up and you don't have to revisit it every single time you're going through something. So put that person's initials on the sheet as well. So you'll have one where there's a weight between the two of you, a heaviness in the relationship. You'll have one where somebody beats the heck out of you with what you did wrong, or perhaps you do that to them. And then the third is you've had some struggles with the person, but you've gotten past it in such a way that you don't have to bring up the past anymore. So now that you have those three relationships recorded, I want you to think a little bit about, in each of those relationships, is there anything that you've done well? Like perhaps they are using the relationship against you, but you keep trying. Maybe it's something as simple as you pray for the person and for your ability to connect with them. Maybe in the case of the person that you've overcome the issue with, maybe you showed humility and apologized. Even sometimes apologizing when you don't think you're wrong, but the reason for that is not to give someone a fake apology, but it's obvious that if something that you did made that person feel a certain way, or they felt a certain way as a result of it, because you acknowledge that feeling and that feeling was not your intention, you apologize for what that person is feeling. So the point is, what did you do well in each of those relationships? The reason why we start out with what you did well is because we can beat ourselves up pretty quickly, but maybe we begin with a foundation of the good in us. And then once you do that, I want you to go back through those three relationships and ask yourself, what is it that you need to learn, or what is it that you need to do? If it is, maybe you need to learn to forgive. Maybe it is you need to learn to really listen to the person's concerns. Maybe you need to learn not to be so flippant to dismiss what the person has said. So I want you to think about what you need to learn or do when it comes to all three of those relationships, because even a good relationship can be taken to the next level. So as you get together in your groups, I want you to talk about those three relationships. You don't have to name the person. That's why we did the initials. Remember that this is a safe space, though, so that if people do name the relationships, what is said in our group stays within our groups. I want you to talk about the three relationships and figure out if is a strategy for making each of those relationships stronger. As you do that, I want to also caution you that just because we do this activity doesn't mean that all relationships need to be redeemed. There are some occasions when you have someone in your life who is absolutely positively toxic or unhealthy for you. And if that is the case, you may have to learn to let go of that person and move on. Let go of that person in love and respect, but let go nonetheless. Perhaps the relationship can be rebuilt later when both of you have changed and grown, but don't think you have to hold on to every relationship. All right, so now that you have completed this activity with your group, I want to leave you with a couple thoughts. Um, One thought is that we hold so much in our hearts, so much that can be good for us, joy, loving kindness. But yet there are other things, jealousy, anger, that we really need to learn to let go, because holding those types of emotions for too long, harboring on things for too long, can actually, we think we're hurting someone else, but it can actually hurt us. So we need to determine when it's time to let go. And as I mentioned in that last activity, Sometimes we have to let go of a relationship, maybe for a time, maybe forever, but we have to use wisdom and discernment as we do that. The second point that I want to make is that our actions involve choice. We always have a choice. I think part of our struggle sometimes is we feel like victims and we feel like we don't have a choice, but we absolutely do. In each situation, whether it's good or bad, claiming our power and then in declaiming our power and determining whether the relationship will go forward and how it will go forward can be such a benefit, not only to you, but also to other people. You just have to figure out, how do you claim your power, especially if for the longest time you made yourself subject to the whims and the decisions of other people. How do you step up and say you are valuable, your time is valuable, and the relationship is valuable to you and you want to build on it, or the relationship perhaps needs to take a break for the time being? And so, in the first situation where the relationship is a weight, it can be this heavy thing that pulls you down. In the second situation, I believe the relationship can be a wall. There's something between you that divides you, and you need to figure out whether you need to tear that wall down or reinforce the wall. But the third situation is one where you might have had the weight or you might have had the wall, but you took that plank and you turned it in another direction. And little by little, you took planks together and you built a walkway between you and that person. Being able to take a relationship that has gone bad and take it to a positive and powerful place leads to wholeness. And so there are relationships in your life that you need to fortify, to build a bridge, to move forward and work towards that person, no matter how much work it takes. Doing that can be life affirming, and yes, it can lead to wholeness. You just have to ask yourself, what do you need to do in order to practice the skills and do the things that are necessary? This isn't just add water and it all works. This isn't an overnight process. It takes time, practice, setbacks, moving forward. But after a while, you will begin to see and experience success. Good luck as you continue to process and work through this activity. And I thank you for spending the time with us today. Greetings. This is Denise Rollins, Executive Director of the Wholehearted Grief and Life Resource Center. Today, I have the privilege to share with you our self-coaching model. And it really allows you to examine what your behaviors, thoughts, and actions are when you are faced with some kind of conflict, different circumstances, or any kind of change. It allows you to move from powerless to powerful as you work your way through a process that can help you learn, grow, and heal. As we begin this conversation, I wanted to talk to you about a couple different things. Early on, when I began my practice of working with people and helping them work through the issues of life, loss, leadership, and legacy, what I realized is that often we carry so much stuff in our heads and on our hearts. I think about the person that gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They are overwhelmed with the issues they are facing. And I would always ask the question, who do you call? Who do you call when you go to sleep one night and you're heavy and you wake up the next morning and those thoughts are still heavy on your heart? What I often knew is that for my clients, I was not the person that they should call at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I know me. I am out of it, I am sleepy, and I am not clear. What I also knew is I didn't want to set up a situation where people relied only on me, but instead they had these tools and resources to work through things on their own. And so this power to address and overcome issues, I believe, is already within us. We help people to tap into that by giving them processes and procedures that allow them to stand back a little bit from whatever's going on and analyze it in a way that allows them to figure out what next steps they want to make. I talk often about when we get stuck in a certain pattern, we begin to spiral, and the weight of the world and the habits that we we follow that often are not good for us will cause us to spiral down. There's a weight that brings us to a place that when we act in a certain way, when we say certain things, that we're not feeling good about it afterwards. But if we learn ways to get through, then as we go through things, which I believe we will go through things for the rest of our lives, if you have the right skills, if you develop the right habits, then every time you go through things, you'll end up at a level higher than you were when you started out. And that's what life is, constantly taking yourself to a higher level. It requires a willingness to go deep within you and to look hard around you to figure out, what will I do with my thoughts, my feelings, and actions? What will I do with them in a way that serves my overall goal as a person? And so that's what we're going to talk about today as we talk about this self-coaching model. The model is what you see before you, and I'd like to work you through this model, giving you a quick overview and then an example of how this model might work. So in the very beginning, at the heart of the model is conflict. And conflict is any circumstances or change that happens to you that maybe rubs you in a way that doesn't feel comfortable. People believe that conflict is always about something negative, and it absolutely is not. Conflict can also be something that's positive. If my children leave the home, the nest, it can cause a conflict for me. Maybe it is that I now have to figure out who I am separate from being a mother. Or maybe it's a conflict because as they go out into the world on their own, I worry about what could happen to them. So we look at the conflict, which is at the heart of our struggle, and we understand that the way we view this the way we view this conflict is shaped by what has happened to us in our past and who we've been in our past, and also what's going on in our present. The way I see it depends on who I am and how I have experienced the world. That's the reason why you can have two people who go through the exact same things, even siblings, and deal with it totally different because their context, the past and the present, is different. And that shapes how they see that conflict. What happens is when we look at what shapes it, then we look at what we do as a result. And that has three tiers. Remember, we begin with a conflict, one aspect. The second two aspects is our past and present. And the last three is our reaction to what's going on, our result that we want, and then the response that we choose. And so the reaction is what I do naturally. It is my habits, those things that I actually do without thinking or even processing. It is automatic. Oftentimes we've been doing this for years. We often call these your triggers. If I see this, then I act that way. If I hear this, then I think this way. These things are so automatic and happen so quickly. Over time, what we learn is to slow down those reactions and give us time to pause, which I always say means perhaps another understanding should be explored. Pause. Someone does something and it rubs you the wrong way and immediately you want to strike back, but pause, because perhaps another understanding should be explored. Maybe what the person did has nothing to do with you. So we begin with our reaction, which is automatic. And as we slow down that reaction, we begin to think about, what is it that I truly want? What is the result that I desire? Oftentimes the result, if we really, really think about it, represents the best in us. So if I'm having an argument with somebody that I love and I want to strike back, which is a reaction, if I slow it down, I think, do I want to make this relationship better? Do I want to stress about what I did afterwards? Do I want this to be heavy in my spirit and keep me from enjoying other things? So the result is what we want, but the caveat is it has to be something that we can control, because there's lots that's outside of our control, but there's also a lot that's within our control. And then finally, we look at the response. When I think about where I want to go, what I want to happen, what I want to do, which is my result, then I stand back for a second and choose. There's power in that choice. I choose a response that is in alignment with my result. Oftentimes, when we follow that pattern, it allows us to figure out what's going on and also to choose an outcome, at least from our perspective, that doesn't have the pain that our automatic reactions would bring. And so, if I were to give you a quick example of that, of what it looks like to work through this model, the example that I would give would be let me give you an easy example. I remember a time that I was on a vacation with my husband. And as we were walking and shopping and doing different things, I asked him what I thought was an innocent question. And in that moment, he really snapped at me. And when he snapped at me, it caused a something to happen in me. And what I actually did in that moment is I stepped away from him. And I really coached myself and said, Denise, you've created this model, work your way through it. So the conflict was that he snapped at me, and I really don't like people to do that to me, especially when I was asking him an innocent question. I wasn't coming to him in a negative way, but it was really, really innocent. So as I looked at the conflict that he had snapped at me and it really, really bothered me, I had to examine it through both my past and my present. So when I looked at what was going on in the past, I realized that probably for most of my life, I've been a rather sensitive child. I have a tendency to fight back. When I was younger, I didn't have physical strength, but I had the strength to fight back with my words. And so when people hit me with words that are hurtful, I really feel like it's a battle that they're trying to get into with me, because in the past, I used that to fight other people. So in the past, it was that way. In terms of my personality, I I can be sensitive at times, and that's another part of my past that um, probably at times I can be more sensitive. Part of it is because I'm an introvert, so I hold a lot of stuff in that I should not do. And so here we have this past where I'm used to um, uh, seeing something in a certain way. When someone gives me a certain tone or certain words, it rears up this fight in me. So what I also looked at, though, is what was going on in my present. And in the present, here we are on this wonderful vacation. It was, both of us worked really hard during the week. And so this is one opportunity for us to get away and to relax and to enjoy each other's company, because a lot of times at home, we don't get a chance to just spend time together. So when I looked at the conflict in relation to the past and the present, what I realized, especially from my present, is I did not want to waste that vacation, that this was so important that we enjoy the vacation. But but when I looked to the way I reacted as a result, my normal reaction is to get angry. It is to strike back with words that are just as harmful, or it is sometimes just to shut down. When people hurt me, oftentimes I will walk away. I will not fight. Instead, I will walk away, and my silence will speak for me. Oftentimes, I don't want to say anything because I know that if I do, it can be very, very hurtful. And so that is my habitual reaction. When we look at our reaction, we want to think, what do we normally do with our thoughts? My thoughts said, he's attacking me. He doesn't love me. He doesn't appreciate me. What normally happens with our feelings? My feelings were, I was hurt. I was sad. I was angry. And what do we do with our reaction? And again, I told you my reactions tend to be silent or to strike back with words that were equally as helpful. But in that context, when I looked at the result that I could achieve, First, the result I wanted was for him to realize that he had been a jerk and that I didn't mean anything by the question that I asked, and for him to totally apologize. That is so natural to want that as a result. But the problem with that is I have no control over whether he apologizes, how he feels about what happens, and even if he notices it. So I had to choose a result that I could control. And so in that moment, the result that I wanted was that I would be loving and kind towards him, and I would enjoy the rest of our vacation because I didn't want to waste that precious time. And so, knowing that I wanted to enjoy it, I had to choose the response. And the response is my power in saying, what will I do? And so my response was, number one, to coach myself through it, right? Because this comes from my better self, the self that wants joy, peace, loving kindness, goodness. And so I coached myself through it. I laughed a little bit at myself, and I decided that when things were not as tense, that I would say to him, hey, earlier it really hurt my feelings that you said this. I really didn't mean anything by it. Now keep in mind, a response is something that you want to do that is not controlled by what the other person does. So if I responded in that way and said, hey, I really didn't mean anything, and he said, well, so you're just making this up, it's not a big deal. A response is what I choose, regardless of the way the other person reacts. So if he reacted to me in that way, it has to be a strong enough response that I don't let that reaction throw me off. Because you know what? Sometimes he won't get it, exactly what I'm feeling. That doesn't mean that I let people walk over me, but it does mean that I take my power back and say that your behavior will not control what I choose to do. And so I decided that when things got cooler and we were in a better place, that I would go ahead and tell him what was on my heart at that moment. But at the same time, in that moment, I wouldn't shut down, I wouldn't freeze up, I wouldn't say anything mean. I would instead respond to him with love, joy, and kindness, and act as if the comment wasn't said. Because oftentimes when I'm walking around and I'm moping and I'm mad and I'm mean, then what that does is it hurts me more than it hurts the other person. And I chose in that moment not to hurt me, not to ruin my vacation, and not to stay stuck in a single moment where he probably was saying something really flippantly and did not realize the full extent of how I might take it. And so with that, I was able to walk myself through it. Would you believe it's taken me a few minutes to explain this to you, but the process itself took me 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, I was able to move from the situation being like this in my face to looking at it from a distance and realizing that I had more power than I could ever imagine. So we want you to begin thinking about this example and how it might apply to your life. Now, keep in mind that as we walk you through it today, you won't fully be able to process it in this time that we have to do this exercise, but you can keep going later. The reason that I was able to do it in 5 minutes in that mall is because I'd walked through that model hundreds of times with clients on my own. And so I was so adept at it that I took something that could have been really bad and made something good out of it. So as you begin, just know that you won't be at that place until you've had more time to process and to practice. So what we're going to have you do is just to think about a conflict, something that has been bothering you, something that's been wearing on your mind, something that has nicked your soul. And it could be something major or it could be something minor. It does not matter. If it bothers you, then it's worthy of working through. And so I want you to write down what exactly is the conflict. You can write, I'm bothered by, I don't like the fact that, this has been on my mind, whatever it is, we want you to write out that conflict. After you do that, and I'm going to walk you through it, but we're also going to give you a handout that will help you as well. After you identify that conflict, I want you to think about your past. That includes the things that have happened to you, what kind of personality that you have, things that have triggered you in the past, maybe even some beliefs that you may have. All of that, how those things may be related to the conflict or may be adding pressure or weight to that conflict. So anything that you've experienced in the past, maybe when somebody said something to you, it reminded you of an old friend who did the same thing. Sometimes we connect things in the moment that we don't even realize. And this ability to stand back and really to analyze is so powerful. So you want to think, what has happened before that is similar to this? Or why am I always so sensitive about this issue? What has hurt me that might be connected to the hurt that I'm feeling about this conflict? And then you want to look at the present and you want to say, what else is going on in my life that might make me want to get out of this conflict or might make this conflict harder? It may be something that's not even related to the conflict at all. So in your case, something happened at work, but the fact that right now at home, your children are not acting in the way that makes you happy. Perhaps something else is going on with your bills and your finances. And because you have these other struggles in your present, it makes the conflict even heavier. So begin to look at what is shaping that conflict. And then you want to analyze what you did immediately in terms of your reaction. And that is always analyzing what were the immediate thoughts that came to mind, what are the immediate feelings that I felt, and use descriptive feeling words to do that. And then what are the actions that I took? Maybe I walked away automatically. Maybe I said something to the other person, but what did you do, your thoughts, feelings, and your actions? The next step is to say, in this situation, what is the result that I want? And remember earlier, we said the result needs to be something that you can control. And so I remember one time I used this model and my son was really sick and I wanted him to be better. That was the result. But do we realize that I absolutely have no control over it? But what I had control over is the way I brought myself to the situation, whether I projected some confidence that could make him feel better and allow him to relax a little bit mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And so we think about the result that we want that's in alignment with who we are and who we want to be. This is our better selves. And once you determine the result, then you decide what is going to be my response. Again, we go back to the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions that we take. And in that response, it is, I have power, I have control. I often have people say, somebody made me feel this way or something made me do this way. No, we have more control over our thoughts, feelings, and actions than we even realize. So this is about taking our power back and working through a process that can help us. So when you get a chance to spend some extra minutes going through this model, what I'd like you to do is then to get into groups, and sometimes you may even want to do pairs, and share your thoughts. Share only what you're comfortable sharing, but what is it you want to say about what you went through, what you're going through, how you reacted to it, what your result is that you desire, and the response, what is it that you're going to choose? When you do that, what I caution and encourage you to do is to practice wholehearted communication. That means listen, speak, and respond to each other with your whole heart. When someone else is sharing, do not figure out how they can solve their problem. Think about the advice you want to give them. This is a self-coaching model. So the only thing you might want to ask people is open-ended questions. But remember, the biggest thing that you need right now is to bear witness to what the other person is going through. Allow them to come up with their own solutions. Because guess what? At 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to be there for them to work through it. And so if they can work through this process and master this process, it will help them in the long run. That you can share as much or as little as you want. Remember, as you're vulnerable, it allows you to go deeper with this exercise. And then I also encourage you to continue work after the session on going through this model. Share it with an individual who can bear witness, a coach, a trusted friend, so that you can keep figuring out what to do. What I love about this model is that it can be applied to conflicts that we face in life. They have to do with life and living, loss, leadership, and legacy. So it really is useful in a variety of situations. So now that you have completed the exercise and processed it with one another, what I would like to tell you is that you have a choice. You have a choice in the direction that you go. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will always spiral in life because we'll always have to deal with changes and things we go through. But if you develop this self-coaching model in every situation, you'll learn to spiral up so that you can get better with each thing. The things that bothered me and affected me and pulled me down in the past are not the things that will bother me in the future because I have learned to work through it. This is about letting go of unhealthy habits and instead capturing helpful tools. You too can move from powerless to powerful. It is a choice. But with that, you must commit to the process and to practice. I can work through this because I practice, practice, practice. And my persistence and self-motivation says that even moments when I don't want to practice, when I don't want to go through the model, somebody has ticked me off and I just want to sit and wallow in feeling sorry for myself, I have to push myself and say, nope, you got to work through this model because you want to keep getting better. You want positive results. And in everything we do, we believe that life is a process that we do in collaboration and cooperation with one another. And that means that we must bear witness for each other. We must have people walk through the process with us, and we must have people hold us accountable. If we do that, we will continue to spiral up. And not only will we do that, but we will teach others to do the same. That is the power and the promise of this model, that you can take it and share it and benefit from it. And that when I heal individually and then share that healing with others, then my community, my family, this world gets better, which I think is a really promising thought. Thanks for participating. Greetings. This is Denise Rollins, Executive Director of the Wholehearted Grief and Life Resource Center. And today's session is really about having a goal and making sure that we achieve those goals. Many of us have heard about having SMART goals, and the focus on this session is to have even smarter goals. And we will define what that means together. But we really want you to be able to envision and imagine the life of your dreams and to make it happen in a way that keeps you pushing and achieving and doing all the things that you've been created to do in this world. So as we get started, let's look at some opening observations. One is we really want you to imagine your best life. We call that a wholehearted life, where you're living intentionally, fearlessly, and expectantly. What exactly are you dreaming of? And as you begin to think about what you're dreaming of, we'll also talk about how you'll get there. We believe that SMART goals are definitely the key. So you need to know what will make a goal realistic and achievable, so that you're not always feeling like you keep falling short of where you're trying to go. So we want to help you to have SMART goals, and we'll talk about that acronym in a second. But we've often met people who have the greatest goals, but they don't have the wherewithal to actually execute those goals. And we believe that you have to be able to set goals and go after them in a way that's engaging and rewarding. That's the smarter part of SMART goals. So we're going to help you formulate some accountability for yourself that is both engaging and rewarding so that you have a chance to make this happen in your life. So if you're ready, let's get started with our activity for today. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and you can easily just do it with a blank sheet of paper, is to dream about the wholehearted life that you desire. What is it that you want to do? Where do you want to go? Who do you want to be? I want you to dream about the day that you actually do live intentionally, fearlessly, and expectantly. If nothing were holding you back, what would you want to achieve? Who would you want to impact? How would you want your life to be in the life of those people around you? And I really want you not to hold yourself back from dreaming about that wholehearted life. So what does living look like for you? What would it feel like if you just saw life as an action word and you went after it with everything in you? If you weren't holding back and being safe, what would living really look like? And then what would being intentional, being purposeful, doing things with a goal in mind, what would that look like? What would it feel like? And what would it sound like? When you're imagining these things, it should be something that brings a smile to your heart and to your face, that you really think, wow, this is what life would be if I really was intentional. And of course, then we want you to think about what would it look, feel, and sound like if you were fearless. It doesn't mean that you don't have any fear. It means that you move, you do, you succeed, and you attain despite being afraid. You do it to the point that your fear is minimized and your faith is maximized. And if you operated in such a space, what would it look, feel, and sound like? And then finally, to be expectant, to think that the best will come to you, not the worst, not the bad things in life, but thinking that the good things in life are just around the corner for you. What would that be like? We want you to think about a dream that just makes your whole being just smile and feel good. Because if we don't have something that really pulls something out of us and makes us feel like this is what life is supposed to be about, it can easily get lost in the shuffle. So I really want you to think about that. And as you think about who you want to be, where you want to go, what you want to do in life, I want you to articulate some statement that this is what I want to accomplish. And let's say for me, there was a day when I said I wanted to be a nationally known facilitator. I believe that I have a gift to share with the world, and I don't want to just share it with my friends and family. I want to share it with people across the nation, because I know what this, for me, what my self-coaching model has done for me. And so I want to go beyond the people who are safe or easy to get to. I want to get to the people who need me and don't even know that they need me. And so in order to do that, I must create SMART goals. And so let's talk a little bit about doing that. I want you to formulate a goal that puts you on the road to success. So if I know that I want to be this nationally known facilitator, maybe the goal is to create recordings and information that allow my tools to get to people who wouldn't be able to come and see me facilitate personally. And so maybe that's the goal that I have. So when I'm formulating that goal, I want to make sure that it is specific, it is measurable, it is achievable, relevant, and time-based. Specific is it's not so broad that we don't know what we're going for. If I just say my goal is to be happy, that is so broad that it's hard for me to determine, did I achieve that or not, because I'm not really saying a lot about the context or any of that. It needs to be measurable. If I want to get my materials out to people, well, what people, how many people do I want to get them out to? By what date do I want to get it? It's measurable. It allows me to say, I set this goal and I actually did it. I want it to be achievable. So if I am saying, I want to be the president of Uganda, right? Well, I'm not a citizen of Uganda, so I'm not going to be in that role most likely. So it's not something that's achievable. So whatever I'm setting, it needs to be something that is realistic and achievable for me, but also relevant. And for me, relevance means it means something to me personally and to who I'm supposed to be. And then finally, it's time-based. By when do I want to achieve that goal? And for me, if I'm saying it's to facilitate and get my materials ready, then I say by the end of the year, I want to have, these specific things done towards that goal. So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. That's what makes the acronym SMART and SMART goals. Oftentimes, though, we make these goals and we have no emotional tie to it. So what I want to bring you back to is we want to think what this means to us, how it feels in our life, and why it's important. So in the things that we talk about in the whole heart world, we talk about CPR, that the heart is so important, and what we do that matters is something that brings us comfort, peace, and restoration. So does my goal bring that to me? Because if it doesn't make me feel good, if it isn't part of what matters to me, then it'll be harder for me to achieve that goal. So I want it to bring me comfort, peace, and restoration, and I believe that my goal will do that. I also want to make sure that in the ICU phase of wholehearted work, that it's something that allows me to celebrate who I am as a person. If I believe that I was truly gifted to facilitate and to share those skills and the tools that I've come up with the world, I see you, that I see me, and the world sees me for what I was created to do. So does it meet that goal? And then finally, does it allow me to have a wholehearted lifestyle? And that's what we talk about in this recuperation and ongoing care part of the wholehearted journey, is that the lifestyle is one that is positive and affirming for me, and to be able to share with people the skills and the tools that got me through some really hard times, to be able to give them something to make them better and make their lives better, is a lifestyle that I would embrace any day. So for me, the goal really works, and I want you to consider, do the goals work for you as a person as well? And that leads us to the third step, which is the accountability and the execution piece. And that's where we talk about the smarter goals. And for that process, what we want to do is to make sure we hold ourselves accountable, because if we don't, it's less likely that we will achieve success. So in holding ourselves accountable, there are a couple pieces. When I'm holding myself accountable, I want to make sure that that accountability process is simple. And that means it's easy to understand, it's easy to deal with. I've often created, and thank God for my coach, but I've often created systems of accountability for myself that had so many pieces to check off and make sure that it overwhelmed me. And it was great creating it because it looked pretty and it looked nice and it seemed like a great system, but it just wasn't realistic and simple, because it wasn't simple. And so you want your accountability system to be simple and easy to deal with. You also want it to be mindful, something that is you can pay attention to, you can be aware of, that is careful and keeps me in line. It's something that makes me think and makes me aware of what's going on. You want the goal also to be authentic, not just the goal, but also the way that I am accountable to myself, some real way, instead of something that doesn't make sense or matter to me. The way I hold myself accountable, it should be respectful as well. I don't want to cause myself extra angst or harm in the ways that I'm holding myself accountable, and I'm making sure that the goal that I'm looking for is rewarding. It is something that feels good, is honorable, that I feel like it's something to aspire to. In my accountability system, whether it's a person or a way that I hold myself accountable, it should be truthful, that it is easy to be honest and frank with me. And then the last two things are that it's engaging. It's something that is worth occupying my time and my attention, and that also that it's rewarding. Oftentimes we set these goals and we hold ourselves accountable, but there is no underlying or overarching reward. And it has to be something, what's the reward if I'm facilitating in the ways that I believe? Well, it's yes, the achieving the goal itself is a reward, but along the way, I want to set rewards for myself that make it okay. When I do the first step by the date that I'm supposed to, I get to celebrate by doing X, Y, and Z, but allowing myself these small victories and celebrations so that it feels good as I go throughout that process. And so you have some time right now to think through the process. It is not about getting stuck with each of the letters and trying to be so correct in each of them. It is about looking at the big picture, that we dream, that we set a goal that's attainable, and that we make sure that we execute it and hold ourselves accountable in a way that makes sure that whatever that dream is, we achieve. I look forward to you breaking up into your small groups, sharing with one another, encouraging one another, and then creating a plan for way beyond this session to make sure you achieve that which you were created for. Now that you have completed the activity, I just want to reiterate a couple of points. All of this begins with you having a vision. What is your vision for your life? And then once you have that vision, what's the plan to achieve it and the commitment that you're going to make for it? When you do those and put those three pieces together, a dream, a plan, and a commitment, that is powerful. The second thing that I want you to know is it's not enough to know that you should go through this process. Unless you're willing to execute on the knowledge and the dream that you have, nothing will ever happen. So go after it and make sure that you do it. But when you do that, I want you to remember that this journey itself is going to have lots of ups and downs. Don't get discouraged by the first down that you face, and don't hold yourself to such a high standard that you hold yourself to perfection, which means you're often paralyzed and don't move forward. The goal is to strive for progress and not perfection. In doing that, what you want to do is ask yourself, how do I overcome the times and moments that are particularly hard? If you anticipate that ahead of time, you'll have less struggle at the time that it happens. Keep moving, keep planning, keep growing, keep dreaming. And when you do that, you will change the world one day at a time. Good luck. Hello, I'm Dr. Denise Rollins, Executive Director of the Wholehearted Grief and Life Resource Center. Today's activity is all about reflection, looking back on our lives and seeing those key moments that may have affected and shaped who we are today. It's always great to look back and to analyze and to see what made me the person that stands before everyone today. As we do so, I want you to think about a couple of things. One is that there are so many things that have happened to us over the course of our lives. Have you ever been with a relative or a friend and they point you back to something that happened maybe 10 years, 20 years ago, even a year ago? And with great detail, they describe what you said, what they said, and oftentimes how it impacted them. And yet, you cannot remember that moment at all. That's because we have a million different encounters over our lifetime. Things that we've said to other people, things other people have said or done to us. And it is impossible to remember every single thing. So it's very possible for a key moment for someone else to be something that is forgotten by you. And yet for you, there are those moments that you can remember as if they are yesterday. You perhaps remember what you had on or what music was playing. Oftentimes you remember how you felt at the moment or the thoughts that were running through your mind. Those events that we remember are the key events that I believe have shaped our lives. These are memories that are burned into our hearts and minds so that we will never forget them. And so I want you to begin thinking about those events that you often reflect upon, because those events are important. It is what shaped you. And sometimes, whether we realize it or not, something that happened many years ago informs our thought process, informs our behavior, and also informs our feelings today. So for today's activity, we're going to look at what has happened in the past and how we have possibly brought that into the present. So what I ask you to do is to pull out a piece of paper where you have a blank sheet of paper on one side, and on the other side you're going to draw a line that's going to look like the image that you see here. But what I want you to do first on the blank side is to begin to create a list of 15 key moments. These are moments that you always remember, and they could be not things that you remembered initially by yourself, but instead these are events that people always bring out about you. Remember when you were 5 years old and you did this, and your mind has begun to create a memory around that. So I want you to write down the key events that have happened to you. And with that, once you do that, I want you to create a brief description. For example, one of the key events for me is I remember, or I believe I remember, that when I was 5 years old, I had a toy gun and I was shooting it towards my mom. And she kept telling me to stop doing that. And eventually, because I didn't listen, when I shot the gun at her, she fell out on the floor and did not move. And I remember crying for her to get up. And eventually she did get up and she said, see, that's what I told you. Don't play with that gun because it's something that could hurt someone else. And that event is seared into my mind. It's age 5, and here I am about to turn 55. And so that might be one of the key events. I might list the day I played with the gun, and then I would tell a little bit about it. And as is indicated on the screen, you also want to indicate the year that it happened, or you may want to do it by the age. So for this case, I might say at age 5, it would have been about 1970 for me. But whatever way you want to put some kind of marker on it that gives you perspective as to when it happened. And what's going to happen is once you plot those key events, then we want you to go on the other side or on the bottom of that page, whichever works best, draw a line like you see on this page and begin plotting out, okay, if I plot out 0 is the beginning and 55 is where I'm at, then relative to that, I'll put a 5 at the beginning, and that's where I had the incident with the gun. And then indicate other things that have happened to me over the course of my life. This gives you a chance to see, was there a period of your life when you had more events happen than other periods? You just get a chance to see the totality of your life and the things that have happened to you across that lifespan. Once you get a chance to do that, then I want you to indicate whether there are maybe two events that really impacted you the most of all those events. What are the ones that perhaps maybe are something that really continues to bother you to this day, or something that you celebrate to this day and you do that on a regular basis? I want you to lay those things out and circle them on the piece of paper so that you know those things that have impacted you most. And because we're going to reflect on why those two events were so pivotal for you. Now, once you've done that, what I want you to do is to get into your small groups, and I want you to share one of those events and the story behind it. So in the case, if I picked out the gun example, I might share that with the group and tell a little bit about what happened. What did people see when they were looking at me? Did they think what did the other adults in the room or the other children in the room, what maybe did they see as they were watching this thing unfold? And then also what was really going on for me. And when I try to articulate what goes on in my heart and mind, I try to always look at three aspects. What are the things that I was thinking? What are the things that I was feeling? And what are the things that I did? Because it really is insightful when we check into our, what I call our heart, our heads, and our hands. What was going on with me at that moment? We also want to share, if we can articulate it, how you think that event affects you now. And then finally, is there anything that you would do different now that you're aware of how it impacted you? So for me, I've given you the example of the gun. And so I remember such fear taking over my heart, and also a lot of confusion when my mom got up and she really laughed and said, "See, that's what you get." I was confused because one moment I was so afraid. And I was also relieved that my mom was okay because she was such an integral part of my life. The way I think that that event affects me now is when I really got a chance to do my work and process it. I think that's when this fear of death and me doing something that will cause harm or death to someone else really began to overtake my life. I remember it as a fear from a young child, and there are times now that I really, really wrestle with that fear. um, I'm still processing what I would do differently in regard to that. There's nothing that I could do differently as a 5-year-old. I think no matter what, I would have reacted the way that I did. But what I think that I could do differently in my present is that when I begin to have that anxiety about me impacting someone's life negatively and causing harm that is fatal, that I can calm myself knowing that this is a 5-year-old's emotions and feelings that I'm still carrying today. So it allows me to put that feeling in perspective. It has become such a habit for me to feel that way, and I can talk myself back from it, knowing that it came from that 5-year-old little girl. So what I invite you to do now is to take some time to process the activity and share with one another. And let's see what happens from that. All right. Now that you have completed the activity, what I would tell you is it does not stop there. What you got a chance to do is to circle two events and to share one, but I really want you to go back and begin to analyze. many of the activities in your life, because these are the pivotal moments. And you want to see, is there an impact today? Is it a positive impact? Then let's celebrate that. But if it's a negative impact, let's do something to perhaps adjust our stories, because this timeline really becomes the story of your life. And what happens is that many of us walk around with these invisible factors impacting the story of our lives, and we do not realize it. So that's the reason why I want you to really revisit all 15 areas by sharing your story with other people, those people who are safe and trusted, and really processing what those activities meant to you, what those incidents meant to you, and how it might impact you today. I think sharing your heart and minds in these ways will help you to really reveal who you are to other people, and it will help other people to really understand you. It also allows us to understand that we all carry this invisible baggage, and that baggage it really can affect the way we are showing up in relationships, and also the way that we receive and process our accomplishments. And so, again, if it's it's a memory that has helped you and affected you in a good way, then we pay homage to that and we are thankful for it. But yet, if it's something that is detrimental to you in any way, then we figure out, how do we stop that impact now? Or how do we minimize it? Because you know what they say, when you know better, you do better. So when you understand what is impacting you, then you find tools and strategies to change that impact. This is a point where you really have power. You have the power to understand. I love awareness, but awareness without action means nothing. And so you're being aware of what's impacting you, and then you're moving to take action so that you change that impact if it's something negative. And here's the thing that I think that we can get the most out of this, that when I understand that I am so impacted by something that happened to me when I was 5 years old, and there's a couple things I can do. Number one, I can give myself a little grace. I have been reacting in this way for 50 years. And so I can be gentle with myself, but also firm in saying, all right, it happened for the last 50 years, but it stops today. And I lovingly allow myself to change my behaviors. But if I can give that grace to myself, then I also want to practice giving that grace to others. There are people in your life who you don't understand why they do the things that they do. You don't understand why they may sabotage themselves sometimes. You don't understand why they don't trust people more. You perhaps don't understand why their behavior is inconsistent with what's really in their hearts. And sometimes they have this invisible baggage that is impacting them in ways that they're unaware. It can be as simple as having a conversation with somebody and just asking them, what are the main memories you remember about growing up? How about your 20s? What are the things that stand out to you or pop in your mind? And then how about in this portion of your life? What are the things that stand out? And then with intellectual curiosity and a willingness to simply listen and not solve someone else's problem, you're just asking them, tell you a little bit more about what happened. And are there any ways do you think that impacts you now? You can even say, I did this really cool activity, and this is what I learned about me. And that's why I'm just trying to learn more about other people. That part is key, about not using this knowledge to try to solve someone else's problem, to diagnose them, or to change them. Instead, what we want to do is, just as we're brought awareness and we can make a choice, bring that same awareness to others. And when we do, the timeline can be so powerful in changing our reality and the realities of those we love. Good luck on processing this information further, both when it comes to you and those people who are important to you. Thanks for completing the activity. Hello, everyone. My name is Denise Rollins. I am the Executive Director of the Wholehearted Grief and Life Resource Center. And today I want to share an activity with you that is all about how we deal with conflict. And if I ask you to raise your hand and said, how many of you just can't wait to have conflict in your lives? I doubt that many of you would raise your hands, because as people, we often just run from conflict. In fact, we have so many negative connotations of conflict, and that's one of the paradigm shifts that we need as a community. But today I want you to really consider this. That as much as we run from conflict, the truth is that if our lives had absolutely no conflict and no issues, what it would mean is that we truly are not living wholeheartedly. Because, see, wholeheartedly for us means you're living without reserve or hesitation. And when you live from such a place of freedom and adventure and enjoyment, and also making a difference wholeheartedly, if you live wholeheartedly, it means that there are going to be conflicts from time to time. And conflicts, despite what we say in our society, are not things to be avoided. Instead, what we want to do is find things and opportunities and skills that allow us to resolve conflict in a healthy way. I believe conflict comes from any change. And so if your life never changes, then that's a problem. And so when you get those changes, both negative and positive changes, don't don't be weary of conflict, but be aware that any conflict can be worked through. What I love about the conflicts that I've faced in my life is those conflicts, when dealt with in a proper way, have benefited me. They have helped me to learn, they have helped me to grow, and sometimes they even help me to heal. What I don't like is the times in my life that conflict made me bitter, or it made me stuck in a position that I wasn't supposed to stay in. If I say to you that conflict comes with change, I know that I always want to change and grow in a good way, so I take my life to the next level, and therefore the people that surround me go to the next level as well. And so if we're looking at conflict from the correct perspective, it means that we need to identify and address conflict. And I believe that the best way to do it is to stand back from the conflict and not only address it from your perspective, but also the other person's. See, a lot of times we have such tunnel vision that we don't take an opportunity to see anything beyond our own opinion, our own feelings, our own thoughts, and the ways that it impacts us. But if we can see how the conflict impacts the other person, we can often find a way to make the resolution a win-win instead of a win-lose. And I think that if I go through something with someone else, I want them to benefit from it in a good way, just as I do. That way they're not stuck and angry with me, and there's a lot of tension when I see them. That doesn't serve them, but it also doesn't serve me. So let's talk a little bit about conflict. And the way we're going to do it is by using the wholehearted self-coaching model, because that model allows us to look individually at what affects our hearts and our minds and work through our issues by looking at the conflict, what shapes it, and what we do as a result of it. But what we have found is that when you're dealing with conflict with someone else, you can use that same mentality and the same tools to not only look at your position and perspective, but also theirs. Working through that process can give you a different, new, and better approach when you go to the person and try to resolve it. So let me show you a little bit about how that process may work. At the heart of the self-coaching model involves what is the conflict. And that conflict is the change, the circumstance, whatever it is, something that has rubbed you the wrong way. So we always ask you with the conflict to think about the issue that's causing you pain or discomfort. And in this case, apply it to that specific relationship. So I'd like to walk you through what it would look like if we consider conflict from both perspectives, both your perspective and the person with which you have conflict with. So I want you to really identify and be succinct about saying, what is the issue that's causing pain and discomfort between you and the other person? And as you do that, I want you to articulate what it is for you, what's painful or what's uncomfortable for you. But then I want you to put on another hat and say, from the other person, why is this an issue for them? And try to see that sometimes, even though you're fighting over one thing, the way you articulate the issue and the way the other person articulates the issue is totally different. And so if it is different, then that begins to be one layer of why there is a conflict. If it's the same, then name that as well. But we want to be able to see what's the conflict for you and what's the conflict for them. What is causing pain about this situation for you and what is causing pain about the situation for them. And then we begin to see what has shaped both of your perspectives on this situation. And that's where we get to examining both the past and the present. So you want to look at the conflict from your perspective and say, what are the things in the past, those past conditions, that's meaning my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences that may have impacted how you view this conflict? And so what about your personality informs the way that you see it? What about the beliefs that you have and that you've developed over time? What about your prior experiences? Did you deal with something like this with the same person before or with other people? And that is making you pull back some emotions that came from way back when, but it feels the same because the situation is very much the same. Oftentimes, people can trigger in us something that doesn't have anything to do with them, but maybe it's in a relationship, and we experienced something that had to do with trust in a relationship. So when a new partner does something that makes us feel maybe we can't trust them, we bring back those old emotions, that old experience, and we almost brand the new person with what someone else did. Or it could be what the same person did. You never know. And so we want to think about what came from my past that could be affecting what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, and what I'm doing today. We also then want to look at the other person and what from their past. It could be the same thing, but reverse, that you're dealing with an issue of trust in a relationship, but you know that the other person was in a relationship where there wasn't a lot of trust. And some of that is bleeding onto your relationship now. You want to really examine what factors are impacting both of you, because sometimes in the midst of conflict, there is so much baggage underneath the surface, and we've got to pull that out and become aware of it so that we can address it. In the same way, we want to look at what's going on as we look at the present context. Oftentimes, if things are really great in every part of my life and something bad happens in my relationship, I take it in stride. I don't get as stressed about it because you know what? The world is good. But when everything else is going wrong, I can have the same thing happen, but all of a sudden, everything is bad about the relationship because I'm feeling bad about everything else, and that bleeds onto whatever this conflict is. So we want to ask ourselves, what am I going through? What are the kind of things that are in my mind all the time? What are the ways that I'm feeling oftentimes? What are the things that I'm doing that could impact the way that I see this conflict right now? And again, we want to say, what about the other person? What are they going through? If they're going through a really stressful situation, if they're going through a period of time where they can't sleep and therefore they don't have rest, when this conflict comes up, they may act at a heightened level and react in a way that just is not consistent with what's going on. And oftentimes, when somebody kind of acts out of character, we make it about us, we make it a big thing, and a situation that could have been small explodes instead of us saying, wow, I know he's going through this at work. And I also know that the bills are pretty high right now. And so the reaction may be consistent more with those things than with the whatever the conflict is that's going on. So again, you're looking at the conflict, how you both see it, and how you're both in fact impacted by other things that make the conflict either bigger or smaller. This is all about understanding someone else's perspective so that you can resolve, hopefully, that conflict in a way that is a win-win for both of you. So once you've done that, you then want to look at, now I'm asking myself, how have I reacted to this conflict? What did I immediately think? What did I immediately feel? And what did I immediately do? We want to really peel back the layers and examine that habitual behavior that we have so that we understand this is what I did initially. And sometimes our initial thoughts, feelings, and actions fuel the conflict and make it worse. If I immediately think of a negative thought about you because of what happened, not taking time to pause and really examine it, it makes something that is small way bigger than it needs to be. But again, I'm asking myself the same question: how did the other person react? What you'll find about this process is it takes the issue from being right in your face to you're looking at it from a distance and you have a better perspective. So what did they do initially? Because sometimes what they did triggers me. And back and forth, you two are triggering with each other with your words, with your actions, and it makes a situation kind of blow up. So once we think about our initial reaction, it's a great time for saying to ourselves, what is my goal? What's the goal for the relationship? What do I want the outcome to be? And in this case, I really want to consider, what might the other person want? Does this person want this thing to blow up like it has? Or is this just a result of all this other baggage that's coming into play? This is a good chance to check your heart and to think about the heart of the other person, to step back and look at the big picture and what is that goal. And for you, this is where I want you to totally focus on you, in that I want you to think about the goal that you have with the relationship that you can control. Because oftentimes we can say, well, I want the other person to act this way, or I want the other person to admit this, when in truth, we cannot control that. So this result is where we take our power back and we say, having understood everything that's going on so far, I'm going to stand back from that. And then I'm going to say, but what is it that I really want? Before this thing gets worse, what is it that I really want? When I think about the best of me and the best of the other person and the best of our relationship, what is it that I want? And then the last and final step is, again, a step that involves only you. Before, we've been looking at, your perspective and their perspective. When we looked at the conflict, how do you see the conflict? How did they see the conflict? What in your past affects the way you see the conflict? What in their past? What in your present is affecting it? What in their present is affecting it? And what reaction have you had? And what reaction have they had? But these last two steps, what result do you want, really has to be what's within your control, and then your response. This is key, because you're asking yourself, what am I willing to do in order to get the results that I desire? But the piece that takes it to the next level is when you ask yourself, what am I willing to do regardless of how the other person reacts or responds? So this makes it important because oftentimes we choose something and then the other person doesn't react the way we want them to. And then we're mad all over again. And this is where we say whether they admit that they were wrong, whether they ever apologize, whether they ever do another thing, this is what I choose to do. I choose to do this action and let it go. That way I'm not carrying this baggage into another relationship. I'm not carrying it into another situation. I'm beginning to understand the factors that have affected my life and take control over my life and let them go. And so you have an opportunity to go through this exercise to consider both you and the other person when appropriate and decide how you want to move forward through this conflict. As I mentioned before, this can be a win-win if handled right. And so think about something, maybe even a conflict that you thought you resolved in the past, but now you want to take another go at it and you want to face it in a new and a positive way. I encourage you to take the questions from this activity, to use the handout that is provided, and really work through your conflict with someone else. Peel the layers back. When you share what you're going through with your small group, what I'm asking you to do is that those people who are listening to truly listen and bear witness. This isn't about you giving them some quick response or some quick solution to their problem. It is about them saying it out loud, hearing themselves, having you bear witness, and then the person who is sharing needs to be the person who formulates the solution and enacts it. That way they have ownership of what they choose to do, and they have ownership of what path they go on as they move forward. I look forward to hearing good stuff about the way you've processed this. Don't feel like there's one way to do it, one way to answer the question. The biggest thing is to have dialogue about considering your perspective and the other person's before we try to resolve a conflict. Good luck. All right, having completed the activity, then I want to make a few closing points. And I believe that in the midst of conflict, there is so much that we can learn about ourselves and others. And so even as you completed the exercise, going back to it, I want you to think about what surprised you when you were considering the other person's perspective and what would have maybe helped you to know about yourself and about the other person. And especially, how can you use that information as you move forward? Because the more we understand ourselves and others, the better we're able to deal with things that happen in the future. At the core of it, I want you to really just consider that broadening your perspective is really important. Number one, realizing that there's a lot of factors that surround a conflict, and there's a lot of ways to resolve it in a positive way. So I want you to broaden your perspective in that way, but also in the sense that knowing that conflict can be something that you benefit from instead of something that we avoid. And if we're able to stand back from our emotions, because conflict often grabs us emotionally and then affects our thoughts and our actions, if we can stand back from it emotionally, we can see that sometimes through our greatest conflicts comes our greatest growth and opportunity. And the final thing is, as you move forward, I want you to really believe in, think about, consider, and practice conflict resolution. Think about how you can use these tools of considering someone else's perspective as well as your own in current and future relationships so that they are stronger, more powerful, and that you can truly achieve that win-win, that out of that conflict, it doesn't have to tear a relationship down, but it can build one up. I often think of the relationships with the people that I'm closest with. And for all of us, we've been through some type of conflict and gotten past it. And I think that's what makes our relationship special and what makes it stronger. Continue to work through these models, and as you do so, if you ever need any help, remember that the Whole Heart Grief and Life Resource Center is there for you. Thank you. So you have completed the online Wholehearted Facilitation course. I bet you are excited and think you're at the end of your journey. Well, that's not true. This is merely the beginning of your journey. I believe Wholehearted Facilitation is a lifestyle. And so you will use the skills and the information that you learn forever. But with any skill, we have to continue to get better at what we do. And so for those who want to continue to grow, expand, and learn new things, we have a couple opportunities for you. The best way to find out about them is to go to the Whole Heart website. It will lay out the options that we have, but I'd like to talk to you about 3. One is I'd like you to consider one-on-one and/or group coaching. The reason is that this allows you to spend time with a master coach to process maybe some of the situations you've been in, maybe the nuances of how to facilitate in the best way in alignment with who you are. So that process can be really priceless. The second opportunity is to be part of a community of other wholehearted facilitators. That way you can hear about other people's successes, even their stumbles. You can hear about a new technique someone came up with or something that they need help with. This community allows you to share information, to get information, and also to build connections that allow you to succeed in what you do. And then the third option is to consider being part of the Wholehearted Facilitation face-to-face course. Whether that's in the same physical space and room or via Zoom, this opportunity allows you to deepen what you've already learned. In that, I have found that each time I teach Wholehearted Facilitation, there's something that I get from something someone else says, and I get better and better each time. I believe that's an opportunity you have, and I'd like you to explore that if it's something you're interested in. As I said, this is not the end of your journey, it is the beginning. And as you walk this path, I need you to know that I'm here and available to walk the path with you. Wholehearted Facilitation will change you, it will change the people around you, and it will change the world. I'm excited for the possibilities for you and for everyone around you. Good luck.